Greetings, brothers and sisters. So I want to do another pre-introduction to this video I started yesterday on July 1st. Today's Tuesday, July 2nd. There are a variety of pictures and videos out there about the difference between Joe Biden 4 years ago and what he's like today, implying that he didn't have dementia 4 years ago. But I was, me and other people, we saw it. I mean, lots of people saw it. He was breaking down mentally. He had the signs. You can look up by definition or by symptoms, signs of dementia, and he had all of those things, right? His temper, where it would flare out and threaten people, challenge them to push-up contests. I mean, you have these moments of anger where he shouldn't. He's campaigning, he's trying to win over voters, and he's threatening them and anybody who challenged him. And sometimes he'd be confused, which is another symptom. But the symptoms are all there for people to look up and understand. I mean, here's just one, like here. Memory problems, particularly remember recent events, increasing confusion, reduced concentration, personality or behavior changes, apathy and withdrawal or depression, loss of ability to do everyday tasks. And then, of course, we know with Alzheimer's and things, there's the anger, all the just having these anger outbursts and just the confusion because you're having unusual reactions. It's just in terms of like you have an emotional reaction to something that people don't understand because you're confused, right? But you just had to look at his frickin' face and realize he had dementia. Early stages, yeah, it's worse now, but it isn't like he didn't show signs because they don't want to blame themselves, the media and all these other people didn't say anything. Oh yeah, we just noticed it. It's the past year, right? No, he had dementia for over 4 years. Like he should have never been elected or even nominated to start off with. Like he was showing signs. The other thing is, he had access to the best quality health care and whatever they could do, medication wise or any other method. I mean, in terms of the allopathic medicine, right? Like he was the president of the United States and he was the anti-Trump guy, and they wanted to keep this guy together. They have a team of medical people around him. He has the optimum care that you could get in the allopathic medical model. And they had a team of people working on this. And still, this is where he is today. And so you think about people who don't have access to the kind of health care that he has and the kind of people that are around him concerned about his health and monitoring it, right? Multiple doctors, multiple, whatever the cutting edge stuff that they have, he was getting. Like they have a different quality of health care. These prominent people in the federal government, famous people. And he's out there, and they were using whatever they could in 2020 in the debates and things. I mean, Trump was saying that he was calling him Sleepy Joe and all these other things because he knew he had dementia. Everyone did. In 2020. Yeah, it's worse. Of course it gets worse. But even then, it could have been a lot worse. Being a president ages you, and he had to do more in terms of, work than a person of his age who would usually be retired. But, they have a team of people monitoring him. And this is what happens to famous people that are still working when they get older. They're considered assets, and they put as much energy into keeping them going. Even people younger. I mean, as you get into your 40s and 50s, there needs to be, if you have a high-paced, high-pressure job and you're somebody of, stature or something like successful in whatever field, you're going to have more of this type of attention. And you're considered an asset to people. You're a money maker. You're, in this case, a politician. And he's, running this scam like with these people around him. So they're going to keep him going the best they can. And even with all that, this is where he ends up. So, this is not, excusable in the sense that, oh, we didn't know in 2020. Yeah, you did know. Everyone knew. He was bad then, and he's worse now. And the fact that he had dementia then, like it isn't early stages dementia now. It's full-out dementia when he was having early signs in 2019. Enough so that he should have never been nominated. They should have pulled the plug on him then. It was like elder abuse then. The confusion, and I'll show you clips of his debates and things, just things that were there, but I've showed the clips already. We all know he had it in 2019, and so probably had it in 2015 or 16 when, Trump was running against Hillary. Like, they probably knew then that he shouldn't be running. That's why they chose Hillary, because he was vice president and he would have made somewhat more sense. But it was Hillary's turn, and he was showing early signs of dementia, and he was like, all right, this guy's done. We're retiring this guy. His last position should have been vice president under Obama. But then, Hillary crapped out. And they were like, all right, let's go with this guy. He seems like the best one and whatever. To beat Trump or whatever their reasoning, he's the best puppet, whatever the reason they forced this guy on the American people. But the media and everybody complied that was complicit with this. And they went along with running a guy and electing a guy who has dementia. And now this is the result, right? It's not freaking, oh, wow, he deteriorated in the last year. Yeah, he got worse, but he's always been like this. All right, so I just want to add that. Let's get into the original introduction here. Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. So this is Sunday, June 30th. I just finished my other video, and it's already starting to get goofy. Biden's raised $33 million. It's a debate, which we'll get into in a moment. Pushback from the Democrats. Just a lot of things to do with that. Something great from Sharon Stone. We'll get into Kamala Harris, the alternatives, and completely how effed up the thing is, right? And so I need to say this because it's something that I have to say nowadays. I went and I had some conversations with YouTube AI bots. They said there's no such thing as shadow banning, but I got multiple comments where people said this to my latest video, probably like 10 or more. I had to, I don't know what they said. I had your channel pop up back up in my recommended. I just figured your channel got shut down. And so a number of people saying this, they didn't know my channel still existed. They're still interested in seeing my content. That's just one of many comments. And so again, please remember to subscribe, resubscribe, hit the notification button, leave comments, like videos, do something to indicate to YouTube that you're interested in my channel. And any other channel that you have like interest in that disappears because they're shadow banning everybody, not just truthers. YouTube just sucks right now. And also bookmark channels. I mean, in your browser, you have a bookmark feature where you can leave tabs open. I mean, the best way to do it is leave a tab open with somebody's channel on it that you want to see content from regularly. Anyways, with that out of the way, let me get into it here. And so I just want to do a brief introduction of what's going on or how effed up it is that this is the situation. Because the division in America, you have some people who think Trump is the devil, is the worst person in the world, a potential dictator, a criminal. And then you have some people who think he's a saint. You have religious people that are putting him on par with Jesus. They mention Trump and Jesus in the same breath. The QBs, that he's some sort of divine savior that was put here to get rid of the deep state, right? And so Trump is considered a hero, and people love him and think he's like the best president ever, and think he's, a service-oriented person, which he isn't. And then the left wing think he's the devil and the worst person in the world, a liar and conspiracy theorist and all those types of things that they degrade people with. And because of that, the polarization in the country, and very few people believe in any official story or non-official story. Everyone has a different interpretation of reality. That we now are in a situation where Joe Biden showed everybody that he has dementia. Like, nobody's like denying what happened there. And yet people are still going to vote for him anyway. And he's getting support and money and all these other things. And so like, that's where we are as a country, where after that performance, he gets $33 million. I'm not sure how much Trump got after he got convicted, but Trump, after getting convicted, raised a boatload of money. And so this is where we're at, right? Where something like this happens, somebody performs as badly as Joe Biden did, and he gets all this support, and they're pouring in the support. Now, I don't know what's going to happen with him. I mean, I don't know if he still might even withdraw. I don't think he is. And there's a chance after, that even after this performance, that everyone knows, 72% of the country knows that the guy is incapable of mentally doing the job. Some of those 72% are voting for Biden, which I'll get into. I'll show you in just a minute. And, like, he might win, right? I mean, he's probably not going to win. It looks like Trump is, going to win, but God knows what's going to happen. Trump might be in prison. We don't even know. And all of this means one thing, right? That we are completely screwed as a country and as a world because these guys both suck. They're both stupid. They're worse now. They're both old. They're way past their prime. And they have really poor characters. Neither one of them is spiritual. Neither one of them is ethical. They're both narcissistic. And this is the best America can produce. I mean, think about it. Like, this is the best, for the most important political job, this is the best we have to offer. And for years, politicians and presidential candidates have been horrible people. And yet these guys are like a new record low. So before we get into the whole whatever's going on with Biden, this whole thing, that all the people who are in politics or really wealthy people, many celebrities, many, successful people, but certainly all the people in government and government itself, they all have a contingency in case things go south, right? And, when I grew up, they were just kind of ending the nuclear, preparing you for a nuclear explosion, right? That World War III with Russia was on the table. And they were openly discussing World War III and a nuclear war. Like, it was just there, present in movies and TV shows and on the news. And if you built a bomb shelter, which was kind of stupid anyway, because what are you going to do, right? Live in there for how many years until the radioactive, it'd be, years and years, right? But if you built a bomb shelter, you were considered a bit of a nut, even though they talked about it happening all the time, right? And so every one of these people, the politicians and most of these successful people, have some sort of contingency or plan in case something happens, something big happens. And yet, if you talk about it, you're considered a crazy conspiracy theorist, end of world doomsday person. Now, they have extensive shadow government. There's supposed to be an underground complex in Denver, Colorado. There's these tunnels that have been documented. People going into these tunnels that are sworn to secrecy, that go miles under the earth, like they go on for miles and miles, hundreds of miles. And, there's facilities under there. There's underground facilities. And then all these other, people have some sort of contingencies of what they're going to do if there's some sort of apocalyptic event. Every politician, every person in power, anybody who has money, thinks about these things because they know it's a very real possibility. But they don't tell you about it, right? They don't indicate anything to you other than little bits and pieces you'll see in some post-apocalyptic movie or pre-apocalyptic movie or something. But they don't really warn you or tell you that you should prepare. What would happen if the system collapses? That's not even something that's on the table. They don't even want you thinking about it. And when you talk about it, you're insulted, called a crazy conspiracy theorist, doomsday cult person, and that you're a weirdo, and there's no reason for you to be doing what they're all doing, right? There's businesses out there where there's a guy Joel Skalton or something, whatever, he wrote the strategic relocation strategy, whatever it was. I'm not going to get his name wrong in the book of the title of the book wrong. But he, was a guy who he builds these safe rooms for people, these hidden rooms for people, emergency rooms, whatever they're called. And, these people have them in their houses. These wealthy people have these things in their houses. These people have places out in the country. They have plans for evacuation and things. And they even run through drills like you did when you were a kid in school. There's people who are doing this on a regular basis because they know that any day things can go south. And the fact that these two candidates and what's happening now with the election is happening, that should indicate everything you need to know about the validity of that thought process because, it's is just right there for everybody. It's on the, cusp of happening. And you can say, well, I don't want to think about it. Sure, you don't have to. If you don't want to plan, you don't want to be a part of that, that's fine. You don't want to do anything. This is what Positive Future kind of represents. Living now like everyone's going to have to live in the future. And even if you don't make it, at least you're moving in the right direction as a person, as a soul. You're realizing that change is inevitable and that the way of life that we've grown accustomed to is going to disappear. And being someone willing to change, willing to adapt is paramount. And it's essential for everybody. And this should indicate to everybody that this is, we're about to have an election between a guy who everybody thinks, half the people think is a devil, and another guy who half the country thinks is the devil and senile on top of it, right? And, both of them suck, right? Like, no matter what you say about them, if you look really, objectively at both people, they suck. But all the other people in government and in media and in Hollywood, like all the prominent people in our country, and then all the rest of us suck as well, right? Like there's just people are not as good or nice or kind or godly or natural or service-oriented or selfless as they used to be. And people weren't great before. Like people are going in the wrong direction, more entitled, more weaker, and all these things. We're not evolving, we're de-evolving, right? We're heading towards idiocracy. And there's going to be a collapse just because of that, the immorality, all of it, right? And the lack of anything that is something that you can say, well, this is worth saving. There's less and less out there that's worth saving, right? And all the gadgets and the lifestyle and the internet and our cars and all our technology, sure, that's great. But I'm talking about people themselves. Like our people, what are people like? How many really wonderful, saintly people are out there? Very few. And less than there used to be, right? And so, the destruction of the planet and everything that we're doing, there's very little to save here. And this is a very telling moment because, knowing that we're on the brink of perhaps World War III and so many other things, energetic collapse, economic collapse, just all these things, right? The need for, them doing something in terms of overpopulation, population reduction. There's all these things on the table in terms of, end of times kind of things, like biblical prophecies, right? Spiritual prophecy kind of stuff. Because every organization, every spiritual movement has a doomsday prophecy because doomsdays happen. Doomsdays have happened over and over again on planet Earth. Tectonic plates have shifted, ice ages have happened, climate change things have happened, ice ages and other things. The melting of the polar ice caps after an ice age, the melting of the glaciers, which brings about floods. There's huge land masses that during an ice age are habitable land because of the water is all stored in these glaciers, and then when it melts, all these things they become like Florida. Like Florida could easily go under the ocean, right? If there was a polar ice cap melt off, but if there was more ice, an ice age, then all these northern places, Canada and Alaska and all these other places would be unlivable. They would be under a state of, glaciers at all times. So the glaciers, and you'd have to move in this narrow band of warmth around the equator, and there'd be a lot more land down there that wouldn't be available now by Florida, there'd be a land bridge between Florida and South America, and all these, civilizations would be built there during the ice age, and then it would flood, right? So these are the kind of things that happen. Catastrophes happen all the time because, change happens. Even on a small basis for animals and people, everyone has their own personal apocalypses in their life, their own, diagnosis with cancer or losing a loved one. And then we have sometimes the collective events that is a reshuffling, a reshaking of the earth and all that goes with it. And so that's where we are right now. And people can see it or not, it's not my problem. At least I'm telling you about it. You've been warned, right? And not in a sense that I'm saying go panic and do something and build a bomb shelter. Like, I don't know what you should do. Like, connect to God internally And work on your spiritual side is always my answer. The gratefulness meditation that we do here, and many of us do, some of my viewers do, and I do personally. And we're finding some way to connect to God internally and develop a spiritual side, which will help you to adapt to whatever's going on in the material world and give you some purpose. Even if the system you're 100% dependent on collapses, you'll still have your spiritual work that you can do, and you can move forward spiritually. Like that's what again, I'm not advising people, but that's what I think is something everyone should do. And then there's other things you can learn to do, learn how to grow food, things like this. I mean, each person has to figure it out for themselves, because each person's situation is going to be different as the apocalypse unfolds. All right, so speaking of the apocalypse, let's get into the whole, Biden stuff here. Okay, good morning. It's Monday, July 1st. I just released a video entitled, let me go look at what it is called here. OMG, Democrats and media are saying it's okay to have a president with dementia. Nancy Pelosi says, that got cut off. Says Trump has dementia. And so that happened. And so Nancy Pelosi said that Trump had dementia. That part got cut off. And so I'm going to follow that up with this. There's a bunch of, it's amazing how mainstream media and the Democrats are panicking. It's not amazing, but it's hilarious. And yet, we might not see any change at all. And so here's what we know so far. And Biden's went up to Camp David, and miraculously, all his family said is they support him and keep on fighting, which is just ridiculous because they're not fighting. You can't fight dementia, right? But it's kind of being acknowledged almost universally across the board that Biden had dementia. But as it stands right now, he might remain as the candidate and as the president, and he might even get elected again. And you got $30 million in donations directly after the debate. I mean, people are willing to give up their hard-earned money to him even after that performance. Like a country that rewards for a performance, that didn't, this stuff happened, right? So here's the clips from yesterday on this news program with Dana Bash. This was just right after the Nancy Pelosi thing.
Who want to move the president's agenda forward and do so not by holding back from him or not telling him things he doesn't want to hear or having tough conversations. I sat in many a meeting with Joe Biden where he went back and forth with us on whether we were right about this, that, or the other. There is no culture of, we can't say anything difficult to him. We got to just move forward. That is not the White House I worked in.
Actually, I wanted to talk about part of the Biden campaign memo that came out that talked about the structure and the sort of logistics, pushing back on the notion that you could even replace President Biden or how hard it would be. It said if he were to drop out, it would lead to weeks of chaos, internal food fighting, and a bunch of candidates who limp into a brutal floor fight at the convention, all while Donald Trump has time to speak to American voters uncontested. All of that would be in service of a nominee who would go into a general election in the weakest possible position with $0 in their bank account. You want a highway to losing? It's that.
I mean, it's not a bad argument at all.
Do you agree with it?
I do think it would be very hard to put somebody else on the top of the ticket now. I think that Joe Biden is our nominee. I think Joe Biden can still beat Donald Trump. I am not saying this as someone just because I work for Joe Biden. I'm saying this as someone after Thursday night. I looked for every voter I could possibly talk to that we need to turn out. Some voters that were...
I want to make it clear here. I think Trump being reelected is a disaster. I mean, Biden being reelected is also a disaster. But Trump is like he's the centerpiece. Like he's where all the energy is coming from during this, nightmare, whatever his division in this country is, right? The division's already there. It's not going away. But Trump has exacerbated it, right? And Trump isn't going to pass anything or do anything that's going to help America. That's not going to happen. Trump's about himself and who's going to be powerless. The whole thing is going to be a mess, right? I don't know what like the one thing that Trump would do is make the Democrats and liberals miserable, which I really would appreciate. Like I really enjoy that part of it, right? So, I have mixed feelings about it. Like in some ways, just watching the liberal media suffer and the Democratic Party suffer is great. But in terms of, the expedition of the collapse of the system and just all this stuff, the chaos and the censorship and all the things that are going to follow, it's going to hurt us worse and, it's not going to help. Trump isn't going to do anything that's going to help, even though people think he's a savior or something. But either way, just, whatever it is, it's going to play out the way it plays out. But I just want to make it clear that, it appears I'm rooting for Trump. I'm just like what I'm rooting for is the Democrats and the liberals be miserable because they've had all the power the last so many years. And they're so arrogant about their lies, right? Like they come from a pompous, we're just smarter and better than you, and look down on conspiracy theorists and all the way that they're being. And the way that they're like, demeaning the Trump voters, and then they're running a senile candidate. And they just out and out gaslight us all. I mean, so, this was a long time coming. But in terms of what that memo said from the Biden team, and it's self-serving, that's what's going to happen. There's no clear front runner. And so they're talking about three people, and I'll show you how they poll. It's Gavin Newsom, who ran California into the ground. He's probably the most polished candidate, but he's really goofy. Remember, he ran over that kid playing basketball. Like, they're just not human beings. They're like, they suck at just being like people. All of them. Gretchen Whitmer, she's like her voice and the way she conducts herself, and the people already hate her so much in the Republican Party. And Kamala, who is just a disaster. Like, I don't know who's worse. But any of them could win because of the hatred towards Trump and the way that the system is, like, whatever, right? And this, as much as this is something that they're like staging a coup in the Democratic Party with the liberal media, they all have to eat the fact that they've been ignoring his dementia signs now forever. So that's all great. That's all a wonderful aspect to this thing. But there would be this cannibalization of, they would get really nasty. And I really enjoy this stuff like that. I would look forward to a Democratic convention. It's coming up fairly soon, where there's three candidates who didn't get a single vote in a primary, or more candidates, like people we don't even know about, beat Buttigieg, going in there and trying to manipulate something for themselves, right? And their team of people, and how nasty it would get within the Democratic Party, like how that chaotic that would be. And, everyone, like Kamala thinking she has the biggest claim, which she is vice president. I don't think Kamala is electable, but we'll see. The only reason she'd be electable is the hatred for Trump. And there could be something with Trump, and Trump might be, he might go to jail, like he might be he might not be able, like it's just all these factors. I mean, this is great. Like, we haven't seen anything like this part. Like, this is one senile candidate and one guy. Trump, he's going to start showing signs of dementia the next 4 years. Like, he's already, like, forgetting things. Like, they're both really old. Trump's in better mental shape, but, like, it's just neither one of these guys should be running for president. And so that's kind of funny and interesting as well. In terms of the show, this is, like, it's now really got my attention. Like, the debate, I was, like, kind of not into the whole thing. But after the debate, now it's on. Like, I'm, like, totally into it. And so there's these aspects of it. But, Biden stepping down means that there's chaos in the Democratic Party and just infighting and just all these things. Like, it'll be fun to watch. But let's get to the next clip here, because these clips are interesting, all of them.
Very strong.
I want to get Kristen in one more time because, and just as you do really quickly, there's a new CBS poll with YouGov this morning on the question of mental health and mental acuity. Joe Biden, the question was, does he have it? 72% say he does not.
And that looks like the polling looked in January, which is why, as unbelievable as Thursday night was, there is a chance that this race is so locked in because of the incredible partisanship. We may have just seen the equivalent of the Donald Trump can shoot someone on Fifth Avenue moment, but for the Democrats. And Joe Biden turning that kind of performance and hang on, he very well may.
Can I just say, I'm so
And so that African American woman, what she was about to say was, I'm so grateful that I got to come to my black job. And Dana Bash said, well, that's a discussion for another time, because remember, Joe Biden and Donald Trump said, you know, I created more black jobs, and remember that whole thing. And the way the question was even worded from CNN. And so they cut this woman off. Like the whole thing was weird. There's a lot of weird things in the debate, right? Like I made a comment about what's a black job, right? What's a Hispanic job? Like it's just, you know, like everyone's so woke and you know, sensitive, but they say stupid stuff like that. But what the white girl was saying here about, you know, I didn't realize this, but in January, there was a poll out and 70% of Americans said Joe Biden's not mentally fit. So it only went up by 2%, right? And it didn't change the close contest between Biden and Trump. Like the contest is still within the margin of error of like 5% or whatever. We don't know what the polls are going to say now. We do have some polls out. But in terms of, you know, people who thought Joe Biden was incompetent mentally, of those 70% in January and 72% now, we don't know about now, but in January, it didn't affect their voting for him. 20 some odd percent of the people who said that Joe Biden was mentally incompetent were still going to vote for him, right? 22% maybe, something like that. So he had like 48% of the vote, right? So it's, you know, like this is all these people watching this and they just don't want Trump to win. And they're willing to vote for a guy who's completely senile in a party that's been lying to them about how senile he is. Like there's no anger there, maybe a little bit of anger, a little bit disgust, but they're going to vote for a guy that is clearly senile. They're going to see a guy crap his pants like he did on the debate stage after, you know, months and years of him being more and more senile, tripping and stumbling and, you know, babbling his way through his presidency. And they're still going to vote for him, like 20%. Like that's like 20% would say, well, it's all the people that, and it's the 20% that say that he's senile and they'd vote for him. And there's another 30%, or it's close to it, that says he's not senile at all. And so people who are in complete denial of his senility, just like people who are in complete denial of Trump sucking. I mean, the Republicans, you know, the Republican voters are just as embarrassingly bad in terms of their low consciousness, but because of the polarization in the country, and this woman who was a pollster, she talked about this before. She was shaking her head because she couldn't believe, and this is since January, that people would vote for like an insane, you know, dementia-ridden candidate. Like they're saying he's unfit mentally, can't do the job mentally, but I'm going to vote for him anyway. Like she was stunned. And, you know, so she looked at this debate being not a factor in the polls. But there is a guy who showed up later. So I saw this. This is really important. Because my wife sent me the thing about the $30,000 of donations. And I show you a little bit of Clyburn. But these people are coming on. Pelosi, Clyburn, these other people. Saying Joe Biden was great. He could still do the job. And he could still, you know, all these things. What about Trump's lies? We're not paying much attention to how many times Trump lied in the debate. Right? Like with all the things that they're saying about Trump lying, Trump destroyed him in terms of the debate, you know, what people were saying in terms of who they thought won the debate. So let's get into this other guy because it's kind of imperative here.
Tonight's debate, as there have been calls for the president to withdraw from the race, including in editorial boards as well as all corners of the Democratic Party. Now, the president himself has also been collecting data anecdotally and through public polling as he too tries to assess what folks are feeling across the party, and that has been a deep concern. Panic has certainly set in. Donors have been racked with anxiety over the president's poor performance on Thursday night. Now, the president, of course, did participate in a fundraising blitz over the weekend where he too conceded that Thursday night was not his best debate performance, but said that he would continue to fight and that he wanted to stay in the race. But the president and his campaign are certainly, Allison, under great scrutiny tonight. And what we know so far from the huddle that he had with his family at Camp David today is that he has the support of his family and their encouragement. Of course, that is no small thing. These are key players in President Biden's orbit and have been crucial in a lot of his decision making when it comes to running for president.
Priscilla, thank you very much for all of that reporting. We're joined now by CNN senior data reporter Harry Enton. He was here to run the numbers. So, Harry, do we have new poll numbers for President Biden post-debate?
We do. You know, CBS News YouGov conducted some polling post-debate. We can compare it to the pre-debate numbers. And the bottom line, Alice, it's not any good. It's not any good. Look at this. Voters who say that Biden has the mental health to be president. It was just 35% pre-debate. Look where it's dropped to now post-debate, 27%. How about that he should be running for president? It was 37% pre-debate. It's now 28%. I have never seen numbers this bad for an incumbent president during my lifetime. I mean, that mental health to be president, just 27%. You might say, okay, you know, that's low, but a lot of people thought Biden was too old back in 2020. These numbers look nothing like this back in 2020.
So the first part is huge, right? That mental health to be president, because running for president and being president is two different things, right? It's the same thing because, you know, if you don't have the mental health to run for president, you don't have the mental health to be president. But either way, I mean, they should be identical numbers. 27% of America says his mental health precludes him from being president right now. So that's basically, you know, 3/4 of the American population is saying right now you can't be president, right? Right now you can't be. You should be. They should fire you right now. After that debate performance, he should not have a job, like as president. And then if they took him out as president, then he would no longer be a candidate. And I don't know what the Republicans are doing. I don't know what their options are. But the world is watching Americans say that their president is not capable mentally of doing the job. I mean, this is playing all across the world on news programs, right? They're saying, you know, look at this guy. Like now they're talking openly about it. Stuff that their leaders, I mean, remember he was at like the G8 and that, you know, that guy with the weird hair that used to be the Prime Minister of England, the guy with the, you know, funny hair, the blonde guy. And he was like, you know, basically, talking to Joe Biden like he was a child, right? They were all, you know, I mean, he was just so goofy there. Like he's goofy everywhere, but he was dealing with foreign leaders, and it looks so bad. Like they all know. Like if we know, I mean, I've known since 2019. Like it's easy to spot dementia. You know, it's something that impairs your ability. It's not something you can hide. Like you can hide narcissism. Like you can hide, you know, multiple personalities and things like this. I mean, that's a little bit harder to hide, obviously. But for short periods of time in public, people can, you know, lots of people have weird mental health illness, mental health stuff, and yet they're able to hide it. But he can't hide this, and he's still president, and he's still running for president, and he might continue on. But then the numbers get worse here.
These numbers were bad already, and the truth is, Allison, they have gotten just considerably worse, even in just a few days after that first presidential debate.
Harry, do we have polling yet that suggests that voters want a different candidate?
Yeah, this is the whole question, right? If it's not President Biden, then who could it be on the Democratic side? And the truth is, there are no easy answers. You know, I went back and looked at the polling versus Donald Trump for a bunch of different Democrats have been suggested. Gretchen Whitmer, Gavin Newsom, Kamala Harris. Look at this. They all trail Donald Trump. So the idea here that we're somehow going to get this magic bullet, that there's somehow going to be some Democrat who can beat Donald Trump easily, I just don't see it in the numbers. At this particular point, If Joe Biden takes on Donald Trump, he's trailing. If there's another Democrat who runs against Donald Trump, they too are trailing. Perhaps you want to make the argument you bring in another Democrat who isn't as well known as Joe Biden, who's has universal name recognition, and maybe they could change the numbers. But the fact is, any Democrat who entered the race right now, at least among those that are being suggested by a bunch of folks, they would all enter the race at this particular point as an underdog to former President Donald Trump.
But Harry, are those numbers old numbers or are those since the debate? I mean, maybe the conversation's changed.
Yeah, those are not numbers that have been taken since the debate, though I was looking at numbers that were post-debate. This takes into account an average, a long-term average, right? Because the key is I don't just want to rely upon one polling number. But even the limited polling data that we have post-debate suggests that none of those candidates on your screen, Gretchen Whitmer, Gavin Newsom, or Kamala Harris, any of those would be favored over Donald Trump. He leads against all of them, whether you look at the pre-debate numbers or the post-debate numbers. And of course, I like to look at an aggregate of numbers, so that's what I did. But the fact is, even if you just did post-debate, it really wouldn't look any different.
Do you have any precedent for how lopsided Thursday's debate was?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to take one solace if you are Joe Biden, the fact is, first debate winner margins. Look, Donald Trump, more people by a 34-point margin said that Donald Trump beat Joe Biden in the debate. That's not much different than what Joe Biden's margin was over Donald Trump 4 years ago. It's actually larger than the Hillary Clinton margin that she had over Donald Trump. But you may remember that first debate back in 2012 where Barack Obama just did horribly. Mitt Romney won that debate in the voters' minds by 42 points. But of course, he didn't become president. Barack Obama was reelected. So I guess if you want to take a look on the one bright note, is there is a history of someone losing the first debate as an incumbent and going on to win the presidency, and that was 12 years ago.
Yeah, but Barack Obama wasn't senile. Like, it's just stupid, like what they're saying. Like, this is a question of senility. This is a question of mental acuity, of the ability to do the job. And somebody who's just getting older. Everyone's getting older, but, you know, he's getting old, right? He's past the you know, like there's the retirement age that most people are retiring, which is in the 70s, and then there's the death age, which is in like the the early 70s. Like, you know, the average age of retirement is 64, and the average age of death is 76, and it used to be 79. It's gone down by 3 years post-COVID and all this stuff with the bloop and all that stuff, right? And so he's past the average age of death by 5 years. And so, like, that's people dying, you know, and that's, I mean, you know, when people die of old age, it's usually by 76. The average is 76. And so the average person's retiring at 64, and he's well past all that. And the presidency ages you, and he's been a political scumbag forever, and, you know, a decrepit person with bad morals. So is Trump. Both of them have lived bad lives. And that eats away at you, right? And so, again, you know, it's just a puppet position, and that's kind of great. That's being exposed. But the way that they're going about this, right, where the majority of Americans thinks he's senile, he's lost 9 points in the dementia category, like 9 points. Like, he dropped 9 points in, you know, whether he should run or whether he should be president in the dementia aspect of this thing. And right now, he's their best option. And so I have a bunch of stuff to get to. I'm going to show some clips of Kamala, some other clips here, Sharon Stone. And that's just stuff that's left over from last night, right? Maybe I'll get a check-in with Don Lemons, who's always, you know, dopey. But that's just from last night, you know, yesterday, Sunday. And so there's going to be some news today, Monday. And then this video is probably not going to go up till Tuesday or Thursday, so Wednesday. And so I'll just be adding things to it about this, you know, debacle. But I just want to say before I get into these other video clips. But before that, there are two things that make this really compelling and interesting for me. Like, I'm really into this, right? Like, in ways I'm not into. Like, a lot of things I cover, I mean, I'm pretty much detached from everything, you know, and whatever outcome, it's all leading to the apocalypse. But there's two things, and if you haven't, I haven't said this in a while, but people who watch my videos, one thing that's a saving grace for me that I don't get stressed out and, fear-based and just overwhelmed by the what I see in terms of the system collapsing, this apocalyptic aspect of what's going on here. I just find when things are collapsing, there's just I find it funny. There's just an element of humor in it, which you guys can see from my presentation. It's just been always the case. I worked at this restaurant years ago, and this guy, he was Hungarian, but he came from Sweden, and he was a disaster of a owner of a restaurant. Clueless, goofy, making bad decisions, and he would go through these phases. He got a great review for his restaurant, which I don't know how even that happened. And people started to check out the restaurant. It was in Northampton, Massachusetts, which is part of the Five College area. It's a trendy place. They are kind of liberal, and there are a lot of like kind of artsy places and restaurants. They have a museum for the guy who invented the Mutant Ninja Turtles. He lived there, and they had a little museum and things like that. But it had a nice little downtown area, and there are a lot of restaurants in that whole area. The five colleges. There's five colleges in one area of Massachusetts, right? And Smith College is a high level of a lot of lesbians go to Smith College. It's a girls' school, and so there's just this influx of like woke consciousness, and this is years and years ago. And so this guy gets a review, right? Like a good review, and he starts like his restaurant was about to close, and he was begging staff to stay, and he'd go from where he was begging us to stay to where he was like mistreating people and being really arrogant. And the guy really liked me for whatever reason, but he, would open up to me in different ways and things that made me uncomfortable. Like I would have no response. There's a time where his wife was kind of stout, like she was, thick, short and stout, like a teapot, a little teapot, short and stout. And she walked by us, and he goes, "I used to date beautiful women. Now I got hard worker," right? And he was like that. And he just went through this phase, and then the restaurant imploded. And, Mariah Carey came in years ago when she was just young. But she was supposed to come in. She didn't, but her crew came in. And there was just weird things. It was kind of a weird, restaurant. But it was on the verge of going out of business several times. And, I worked there, and I quit, and then I came back part-time. And, it was just really interesting to me what would happen when it was closing, when the business was collapsing. His family was a family business. And it was just, entertaining, right? And there's just something about when something's imploding that's funny and interesting. Like when people go through their apocalyptic times where their lives are collapsing. I'm not laughing at people's misery, but truth comes out. Like I always notice this, like in a divorce situation or, when something's imploding and, people can act nice and can sort of be performative and, keep some kind of social media profile, when they're in these phases when things are going well. But when things implode, like their true nature, or at least their true nature, lower nature comes out. And it's just really interesting to see what happens. And that's what's happening with the Democratic Party right now. Especially the Democratic Party, because, the way they've behaved and how arrogant they've been. It's just kind of great. Like, it's just a good time to see how they have no good options here. They're like no options. That's like, this is like, there's just a lot of bad options, right? And their number one option appears to be stay with a guy who's senile. Like, it's all right. They did this when Joe Biden started to run. And, they ignored the majority of this. But Jon Stewart and David Letterman and CNN, which I showed you in my last video, covered that he was a groper, that he was touching women inappropriately in this way. Frottage is consider a sexual offense. That would be like rubbing up against somebody on a subway, right? When I work with teenage sex offenders, one of the things that they would do is they had to admit to all their weird behaviors, their illegal sexual behaviors, and they would talk about frottage, like they would say they did, oftentimes they'd admit to something that, people didn't know about. It'd be rubbing up against somebody on the subway, and Joe Biden was exhibiting that in these, he would swear the people in, like he'd swear the senators in because he was the vice president. Kamala Harris now does that. And he would use that opportunity to glom onto the women and the kids and all these things and say inappropriate, weird things and just, the way he was touching them, and the kids trying to kiss him and sniff him, and all the things that he did. And in 2019, they knew he had this problem, and so they came out and they had a woman who was a Democratic shill who was running in Nevada say that he smelled her hair, and he apologized to her, and they made a big thing about it. Like in 2019, right before he announced his candidacy, like, let's get this out of the way. Let's acknowledge that he's a creep, and then everyone's just going to forget about it. And so that's how they dealt with it. And he only had 20% of the vote, but they manufactured it so he was the only guy that could beat Trump in the narrative they presented to the Democratic people. And the Democratic people got behind this gaffe magnet and this snoozler and groper with a lot of negatives. He had been a plagiarizer in the past, which they didn't even address. He copied people's life stories. He told stories that he said happened to him that didn't happen to him. And he's done it over and over again. He does it now. He recently talked about growing up in whatever Delaware area, wherever he was, Pennsylvania, and sleeping in the same room with his sister and just weird stuff. But like the numbers don't add up. Like he had, more siblings than he really had. Like just, whatever. I covered this before. I forget the details. But he just makes things up. He hears somebody's story and he just takes it and starts telling people that's like it's his story. And it isn't. Like he didn't live it. He wasn't, just bizarre. And he's done this over and over again. And he just makes up lies, like saying that he had Somali friends that were taxi drivers, and there was none of them in Delaware. Like he just makes these things up. And everybody knew about it. He was a joke as a vice president, and he was a joke before that. Like he was just a joke. A guy who had been around forever, and no one took him seriously. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, this guy should be president. And they just like scrubbed him, all his negatives. And that's maybe what they're doing now. Like they're getting it out in the open. Okay, he's senile. He's better than Trump. Deal with it. Like that seems to be their message. Look at what a liar Trump is. Oh, Trump's senile. Trump's the senile one. I mean, that's what Nancy Pelosi said yesterday, which in the video I just released. So, I mean, like that's their point of view, right? But the media has been more and more turning on this guy. The Daily Show, like, kind of savaged him, Jon Stewart, whatever the post-election thing was. And then, they're more and more turning on this guy. And, CNN and MSNBC are asking questions they haven't ever asked and should have asked, like this guy senile, what are you guys going to do? And so it's not a good thing when people say some guy's your kind of candidate's senile. He should withdraw. And, like, just in terms of him getting elected now, right? Because you're running a guy that over 70% of people say is senile. And it's pretty much out in the open. Like everyone, Clyburn said, like, is kind of saying he's not. Like he said it was jitters or whatever. Like, oh, it was Clyburn. I don't have that clip, but he was talking about how it's over preparing, where you're getting bombarded by info, and you just underperform in the debate because they gave him too much info. Like he blamed it on his staff and mistreating him and giving him too much prep time, like just stupid stuff like that, right? But the majority of people are now acknowledging that we have a senile president. I mean, there's 20%, that 27%, whatever it is saying no, or whatever number it is right now, 20, whatever it is. Everyone else acknowledges that we have a senile president. In the media, they're not saying the word senile or dementia, but that's what this means, right? And so this is the other interesting part. Like, what are they going to do? Like, what's going to happen? Because we haven't seen anything like this, right? Because the stuff between the Trump thing is something completely new. Trump is considered a fool and a joke, but also some criminal mastermind. Like they have all these different narratives for him, and he's the center of everything negative and the hostility, in the eyes of the media. Like they say they hate him, but they can't stop talking about him. And then he, lost, and he's come back with a vengeance tour, like literally a vengeance tour. And that guy, Lindsey Graham, was on the news saying, Joe Biden did things at the border, and he should, be criminally prosecuted. Things that he's done that are criminal, and things that are going to happen, things that happen at the border, and some of these other things. He was talking about different ways they might go after Biden, and he was kind of saying these like, if Trump wins or whether he wins or not, we're going to go after him, the Congress, Senate, whatever it is, right? And maybe Trump will like he's implying that like there'll be retribution and these things, and so the hostility and we haven't seen this in a political, nothing like we see now. But then one of these guys shows that he's senile, but not when he's at the end of his term like Reagan. Like people are going to have to vote for a senile guy because they hate the other guy so much more. But the other guy is also old. And so you have this situation like what's going to happen? Are they going to replace Joe Biden and then have this like, this cannibalistic fight of these selfish, narcissistic sociopaths all want to, their team of people who are going to push them and just destroy the Democratic Party? Democratic Party should have been destroyed after the debacle when they got, so-called hacked. And the DNC was falling apart. It was in debt and all these things after Obama. And so, they came back with a vengeance, but they were on the ropes. And when Trump won and all those things, and they hate each other. Like there's groups of people in the Democratic Party that are opposed to each other, and they don't like each other. And there's whole other narratives there. And so this is something new. We haven't seen this. And whenever I see something new in the show, and there's a decision point, right? The American people, the Democratic people, the Democratic Party and the American people have decisions to make now. The Democratic Party got to decide what they're going to do about their senile candidate. And then the American people have to decide what they're, of course it's all rigged and whatever it is, but, what they're going to do to deal with what's going to happen, whatever new candidate they have or whether they're going to actually vote for a guy who is, senile. And, people think that Joe Biden couldn't get those, whatever it was, 80 million votes that, that Trump keeps on talking about. But you're underestimating how much people hate Trump and how scared they are of him. I mean, people are, after Biden's horrible presidency, it's going to be harder for him to crank out the vote because he's lost demographics and his senility. I mean, he's a much weaker candidate now than he was before. But the guy shouldn't be he should not have a job. The guy should be out of a job today. Like that's, I talked about this in my, other video in the intro. But he should be out of a job today. Like that's what should happen. Like that's, sometimes it's very easy to see what should happen. And after that debate performance, this guy's the most powerful political leader in the world, and he's senile. And he's just getting worse. And he's supposed to, he's got access to nuclear capabilities. I mean, the most powerful army, and he's senile, right? And so, either the presidency is a complete joke and he's being handled, and that's what's happening, or, he's a complete risk to the world's safety. And world leaders should be calling and saying, get rid of that mother MFer right now because, we feel threatened. You guys get rid of your senile president. I mean, this is, there should be a call. I don't know what the Republicans are doing in terms of some kind of, making this something that they battle out. But the guy's senile and needs to, what's the protocol for a senile president? Especially now at a time where we're on the verge of World War III and, it's a decision-making time. And so this is all new. We haven't seen anything like it. And the way this is going to play out is going to be really entertaining. Like there's no doubt about it. Because, in a sea of bad choices, they're going to have to pick one of them. First, the Democratic Party is going to have to either go with Biden or pick another bad choice because the candidates all suck. I mean, they suck on the Republican part too, right? Like nobody thinks Nikki Haley's a solution or DeSantis to Trump. There's no better candidates, right? And this is, signs of the apocalypse. This is a sign of America crumbling, which I just love. I mean, right now, like it's great viewing right now. Then there's the post-apocalyptic scary time that we're all going to have to face up to. But right now it's an interesting, like, I mean, I don't like popcorn, but get the popcorn type of thing, right? And so, all right, let's get into it here with Kamala. Okay, so I just watched the news, which is great. And both Morning Joe and the morning show on CNN were pitching hard for Joe Biden to stay, right? His family, who, don't care about elder abuse or whatever. They're saying we're supporting you, Joe. And so it looks like they're going to stick with this guy. I mean, they're trying hard to, even though the media is covering his disaster. But let me show you those clips here because they're hilarious.
Now undergo a whole new process with a whole new crew of people. Joe Biden is our nominee. He is the one who is best suited and best positioned right now to beat Donald Trump. Everyone else that you just showed on the screen, they are great for their states and for the positions that they are in right now, but they are not well known nationally, Sarah. It would be almost impossible to mount a campaign for any one of them between now and November where they could raise the money, put in the infrastructure, do everything that they would need in order to beat Donald Trump. That's just a reality.
The reality is it would have to be Kamala. Kamala, I don't know if she has what she has in terms of her own team. She has some people who are her own team, but she would just use Biden's team. She's a part of the Biden administration. They would just replace her and keep the same team and the same money and all these things and just, move forward with that. That would be their only option. They don't want that. She's a disaster. They don't like her. Nobody liked her. This is what they have to, I'm going to show you the Kamala stuff in a bit, so I'll get into Kamala there. But there's no other real choice here because all these other people are not a part of the Biden administration and taking over his team of people, his election people, because she's already being handled by his election team, right? She's a part of his candidacy. So it's Kamala or nobody, right? And so, and just all of it, like all the, we'll get into, I'm going to show you the Kamala stuff in a bit.
And so that's why you hear Debbie Wasserman Schultz, Senator Coons, and even Jamie Raskin at this point understands that what we need to do as a party, if we want to beat Donald Trump, is focus on the choice at hand. A good man, a decent man, an accomplished president who had a bad night versus a bad man with a putrid character who lied every single time he opened his mouth during that debate, wants to destroy our Constitution, get rid of our democracy, be a dictator on day one, is a convicted felon, wants to take away our rights and freedoms. That is still the contrast. And I believe at the end of the day that the American people will focus on and will choose a president that has given them the accomplishments he has for the 3.5 years. And they're not going to let a 90-minute debate eclipse all of that.
I don't know what kind of October surprise they have. And I don't, Donald Trump's got all these court cases, all this stuff, right? He's going to be sentenced at his same time as his Republican convention. But right now, Trump would win. Like he would win before the debate. Like he would have won. He would have won all the battleground states, right? And, it's just going to get worse for Biden. There's going to be other bad days. And now this is being covered. They'll make a decision and then the liberal media will be less covering this as, but it's just going to always be up and it's going to be part of the story. And then, Trump will be president. Like right now, that's the path forward. And again, there could be some crazy stuff that happens, whatever. Like until the election is over and Trump's won, it's all in debate. But the choice right now is between Donald Trump, who you may hate or love or whatever, Democrats hate, and a senile guy, right? Like that's the choice right now. There's no, people, 72% and, majority of Americans understand that's the choice, that Joe Biden is senile. And you're asking people to vote for a senile guy because the other guy sucks so bad. That's your argument. Okay, let's go to Mika, which is even, that's the worst.
Headlines and opinion pieces from major news organizations, former party leaders, and very loud whispers, mostly behind the scenes, from present leading Democrats who say it is over. Here's a taste of the global call for President Joe Biden to get out of the race. The New York Times editorial board says Biden is not the man he was 4 years ago, calling his candidacy, quote, a reckless gamble. Editors at Georgia's largest newspaper, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, echoed that take, demanding the president pass the torch. Quote, Biden deserves a better exit from public life than the one he endured when he shuffled off the stage on Thursday night. And then there were the headlines. sneering, mocking, jeering all at once. This was the performance that has gotten us to this point.
We have 1,000 trillionaires in America. Billionaires in America. And what's happening? They're in a situation where they, in fact, pay 8.2% in taxes. If they just paid 24%, 25%, either one of those numbers, they'd raise $500 billion, I should say, in a 10-year period. We'd be able to wipe out his debt. We'd be able to help make sure that all those things we need to do, child care, elder care, making sure that we continue to strengthen our healthcare system, making sure that we're able to make every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to do with the COVID, with dealing with everything we have to do with, look, if we finally beat Medicare.
It was bad.
All right, so they're going in on him here, but she's going to reverse all this. Like, you see that, right? You look at the guy, if you didn't know who he was, and you would say, why is he out there? If you were tuning in for the first time, you would say, oh my God, this guy's got dementia. The people around him should take care of him, his family. I mean, people who, are so-called Joe Biden lovers. His wife, Jill, Dr. Jill Biden, his whole family, his whole political team, Mika, all these other people. The guy can't do it. But when you hear her argument, like it's stunningly bad, right? Even for Mika.
He said, we quote, we beat Medicare. He couldn't seem to land a thought. It was an unmitigated disaster by any measure. More than 3 days after that debate, it is still hard to comprehend what we saw from the president. The weak, raspy voice, the inability to complete basic thoughts. Most importantly, the failure to call out Donald Trump on his endless lies. Where was that? And yet, the very next day in North Carolina, there was Joe Biden, back to form, finding his voice, his winning smile, the vintage sparkle back in his eyes. Two appearances that were as different as, well, night and day.
I don't debate as well as I used to. But I know what I do know. I know how to tell the truth.
Okay, first of all, he has dead eyes. His eyes are black and dead, and they've always been that way. He doesn't have a sparkle. His smile is reptilian, and it always has been. He's a creep. But she's saying that he's back to form. He's more energized, right? He came out. I don't know if they gave him a shot. I don't know what happened here. But it doesn't matter because, like I said, dementia isn't something as you judge it by the worst moments, right? When you're talking about capacity and allowing somebody to do something where now you have to make sure they don't drive, for example, because they might have an episode, right? But he's going to say the second thing. I know how to, first of all, he doesn't know how to tell the truth. He's one of the worst liars, plagiarizer, horrible person. All these things that they're ignoring. Groper, snoozler, sniffer, all the things. But he's going to say, I know how, I know the difference between right and wrong. And watch his mouth quiver. He's going to cough, and then his mouth is going to quiver.
I know right from wrong. And I know how to do this job. I know how to get things done. And I know, like millions of Americans know, when you get knocked down, you get back up.
So what was different? A little more sleep? Perhaps it was an event during the day rather at night?
He's better here, but he still isn't great. He's still old, and he's still if you watch the whole speech, he has his moments, less gaffes, right? He's performed better than the debate. He's still horrible. But what are you talking about? A little bit more sleep? He's the president. Listen to her argument now from this point on.
On debate night, 90 minutes, starting at 9 p.m., Joe Biden was fresh off back-to-back trips to Europe, first to Normandy for the 80th anniversary of D-Day and a state dinner with President Macron, and then to Italy for the G7, followed by a flight across 12 time zones to LA for a fundraiser with former President Barack Obama. Just 33 hours later, he was headed back to the East Coast.
33, there's a number for you. But listen to what she just said. Normandy, France for D-Day. Big thing, which they do. And then he has to go and visit foreign leaders because that's part of his job. He also has to raise money. So, he did what president or candidate should be doing, right? This wasn't extraordinary. And then he had 33 hours, again, weird number, but 33 hours. That's over a whole day and a half to get ready for the debate. He's been doing this forever. He's a career politician. And she's using that as an excuse, right?
The debate was also 2 weeks after his son Hunter was convicted on 3 felony gun charges and faces prison time. President Biden painfully told America he would not pardon his son. I really question his schedule. It makes me angry that he was moving across the world on 4 different time zones. It seems to me this is a lack of discipline. These were important events that he was going to, but the stakes in this election could not be any higher.
Are you shitting me, Mika? This is his job, right? So in 2020, they were able to hide him away because he couldn't campaign. And I showed you in my first video clips of him. He challenged a guy. He walked up on a guy over gun control in a factory, called the guy fat as a nickname. Shut up, fat. And he challenged that guy to an IQ contest and a push-up contest and yelled at him. And then the follow-up interview with a nice NPR lady. He went after her. I showed you all these things. And then all the multiple gaffes and things that happened that I didn't show you. And they were all showing him signs of dementia, right? And he looks much worse now. He's aged. Looks like he's aged about 8 years, 10 years since then. And he had dementia back then, right? I thought a great name for this video would be, I was telling my wife, the Democrats and Joe Biden puts the Dem in dementia, right? And so, that's just wonderful. But, this is his job, and he couldn't campaign. And so 2020, the COVID thing conveniently kicked in, and they hid the guy away. They've been hiding him for 3 years, which has been discussed. They won't give access to the president. This is being discussed on these shows. These things are coming out, which we know. He doesn't do interviews like he used to, and he doesn't do press conferences. And he talks, in front of a helicopter or airplane and says stuff like, my butt's been wiped, or whatever he said, weird stuff. He talks with an ice cream cone in his hands, like some doddering fool that everyone's just like, being humoring. They're humoring the guy, right? There's a term called elder speak or patronizing or whatever you want to call it, right? This, moment where you're seeing somebody senile or when you're dealing with somebody like that and you have to basically talk to them like they're a child, right? And you have to, pamper them and just coddle them or whatever it is, right? This is what happens to people. You no longer can have when you're dealing with somebody who's crazy, there's no longer a two-way dialogue. And as you get to somebody who has dementia, there's no space for the person to be concerned or even aware of you. As they go into senility, they go into Alzheimer's and things. They're just completely selfish. They become myopic and they can't even consider other people, and they can't remember. They can't remember your name or whatever. Who are you? This thing's right. Their brain doesn't work anymore. And for her to suggest that he shouldn't do his job or shouldn't campaign anymore because he's confused and he's old, and that they should somehow have rested him for a week. He had a day and a half. The president has a very busy schedule of meeting with world leaders, being out in the public, answering questions, having press conferences, dealing with the media, all these things, right? How many times do you see the president on TV, news conferences and things like this, press conferences, and then just speeches and all the rest of it, and then traveling and going to these meetings that are, he wasn't supposed to go to G7? These are global meetings and things. Things are going on in Europe. Things are going down on a global situation. And he shouldn't go to these places, right? And the reason they have a president who's campaigning go to these places is because he looks presidential. It's a campaign move to remind people, oh, he'll be in the news and they'll be talking about him meeting with leaders and doing these things, right? But I mean, he was a disaster. Like Mika's leaving out that he was a disaster. He looked like he pooped himself at D-Day, right? It was diaper day. Like, this is a new D-Day. I mean, he looked horrible there. And there was multiple issues. There was multiple gaffes, confusion. So he was confused over there. And so her saying go into these different time zones, well, that's what you do. You travel. He's too old to do his job. Like, this is the job, right? It's the job of the president. It's his job to campaign. He's not not able to do those things, and he can't do the jobs. He's admitting that his staff made him do his job, and that might have made his debate performance worse. And then his son becoming a felon. Well, that's because you live in you have a horrible family where he showered with his daughter. I mean, all these weird things when she was a teenager, and just so many weird things in his family. His other son dying, his wife dying. I mean, just the stuff around his life. He's such a selfish prick and just a bad person. And like, these things are catching up to him, right? Not that Trump's better, because he's not. Like, me saying the truth about Biden doesn't mean Trump's good. People have this, it's like Ali Frazier, right? It's like the Celtics versus the Lakers. It's like the Red Sox versus the Yankees, right? You have these, Michigan versus Ohio State. They're tied together. Biden and Trump are always going to be tied together. And they're both saying, the powers that be are saying, well, only Trump can beat Biden, only Biden can beat Trump. It's like this, bizarre way of looking at it. Like, you can't go in another direction, right? The guy's senile, and when he does his job, it gets worse. Okay, he can't do his job then, right? And so they can take him off the playing field right now, and Kamala would be the president, and then the first woman president would have to, then run, and with Biden's political team, it'd be a fairly smooth transition. Kamala's been planning for this forever, right? And so it'd be ready to go. Like, just do it. That's all you have to do. Again, I don't have a stake in this one way or another. Kamala annoys me. It'd be an interesting twist. But they won't do it, right? They don't want Kamala because nobody wants Kamala. And then the rest of it, I'll get into that, like I said, when I talk about Kamala. But the reality is that this guy has dementia, and no matter how bad you think Trump is, doesn't make Joe Biden competent mentally. So you're having a person who you're saying has a horrible character, right? The worst person in the world, running against a guy who's senile, so you pick the senile guy? That doesn't make any sense at all, right? I mean, if you were on a bus or a plane, and you say someone hit land this plane, and like there's two guys that have some background in it, one's Trump, one's Biden, you'd pick Trump, right? You don't pick the senile guy. Like, I don't know in what situation you'd pick the senile guy, right? If you had two guys, that you needed to fill a job, and you had a choice between Trump or Biden, you'd always pick Trump, right? Yeah, he's a liar, he's a deceiver. But I mean, a guy who's senile, I mean, like, and Biden's a liar and deceiver. Like, Biden's a liar and deceiver, and he's also senile. And so they're both have poor characters. They're very similar. People don't see it, but their characters and their flaws, and they're both gropers, and they're both cheaters, and they're both liars, and they're both flim-flam, man. They both, one's a career politician, the other's a scumbag businessman, but they both have their horrible character qualities. Very similar. The charges against Trump, the things that they say about Trump, you could also say about Biden. The things you say about Biden, you could also say about Trump, but Biden is senile. And so he's worse because they're the same guy, and one guy is mentally more deteriorated.
Like many, I want to know, was this a one-off episode or a sign of what's to come?
This is just stupid. It's not a one-off. We've been, documenting this for all of us. Like, so many of us have been documenting his senior moments for 5 years now. And if you're saying this kind of pressure made him collapse like that, and again, this was a long period because it was a debate and was just out in front of everybody. And it was throughout the debate. But he's been doing this for years now. But it's just going to continue to happen because he's breaking down mentally. Like, do you not understand old age or senility or dementia or any of these things, right? Everyone knows what happens. It does not get better, and you're defined by your bad moments, right? you have remission. I've said this over and over again. Like, is this a one-off? Is this never going to happen again? Is he going to be back in his 20s? No. Like, what happens when some other bad thing happens to him? It shows you he can't handle the frickin' pressure, Mika. Like your whole statement here. He can't handle the pressure. His handlers didn't handle him well enough, and they didn't pamper him. They didn't, make sure that he didn't do what he did. Like he should have stayed home and slept for 2 weeks and got ready for this debate and got plenty of rest and not be 4 different time zones. My God, it's a whole, that's the job. And you can't do the job, then don't do the job, right? Like he shouldn't be president now. Like there's no debate about this. It's hilarious that they're actually like saying we should have a senile president.
Can his team and the president himself move forward with more discipline and also manage the fact that he's 81? And while we're at it, let's talk about his age. Age is wisdom and experience that in the case of Joe Biden leads to more bipartisan legislation passed than any president over the past few generations and the largest expansion of NATO's alliance in history. Under Joe Biden and his age, America is stronger economically and militarily than any time.
Yeah, she's going to keep on going with that. So, again, doesn't matter what his past accomplishments is. He's got dementia. None of these things matter. Like dementia is dementia. Doesn't matter. Like it doesn't mean wisdom. Someone with dementia doesn't have wisdom. Like, he's wearing diapers more than likely. And we don't know that for a fact, but, we can speculate. But we do know the guy can't complete a sentence. He's disoriented. He's never been wise. This guy doesn't have wisdom. Whatever you think he did as a president, whatever things that you're saying he's got, all right, whatever. Like those are debatable, whether they're accomplishments or they're just more bad stuff for America, whatever. But, like that's not, like you don't say, all right, the guy's done a great job and he's got all this experience. Let's ignore the fact that he's got dementia. He's got to make decisions and he's got to inspire the American people. And what if we go into World War III with this guy as president, right? I mean, it's just, like you're screwed. Like you're totally screwed. And like this is how you're reacting. You're trying to sell to the American people that they should have a president that's mentally incompetent. I just want to say one more thing about this. I mean, it's so bad. It's so bad because it hurts your customers, right? I talked about this with Taylor Swift, making her Swifties buy multiple copies of her crappy music, right? Like, what she's charging them for tickets and then getting them to put them in harm's way to go out and harass Scooter Libby or Scooter Braun or whatever his name is. All these things. Scooter. Scooter. It's Scooter. And so, when you treat your audience poorly, the people that are supporting you, and they're saying to their audience, the Democratic Party and the mainstream media, that you guys should vote for a senile candidate. And, Trump is special. He sucks, but he's different, right? Like, we've never seen a candidate like Trump. Irreverent, businessman, not a career politician, coming in there, reality TV star, flim-flam man, all these things. And he's unique. Like, we'll never see another Trump. And the energy that he consumes, he's a star, like, a villain star or a hero star, whatever you want to say. Trump is a star. He's not brilliant and he's not a good person, but he's a star. He commands attention, right? He commands, the way Madonna's a star, Michael Jackson was a star. He's somebody who, Elvis or whatever it is, right? Somebody who stands out. Is just somebody who's built for the spotlight and enjoys the spotlight. Was and is a hack. Like Trump ran for office one time or twice, and the first time he won presidency. Right? He ran for office, became a politician, and became president. And he inspired people, like people love him. And he has a lot of energy and enthusiasm in his crowd and his followers, his, whatever they are, cult followers, whatever you want to call them, the Trumpers. Same way Bernie had some of that energy too. But the Democrats have nobody else that has that kind of enthusiasm. Obama had it in a different way. Obama was a star. And, you could say Clinton was a star in his way. Not like Trump, but, more politically. Biden was never that. Like, Biden was eclipsed by Clinton. Biden was eclipsed by Obama. Like, he got passed up. He ran for presidency when Obama ran the first time. I think he ran against Clinton, right? So he ran against these people who were just stars, rock stars in the Democratic Party, right? Sarah Palin was a rock star who imploded. Hillary wasn't, right? Hillary was married to a rock star. And so, again, I'm not talking about who they are as people or any of these things. I'm just talking about Joe Biden was never that guy. He ran for president 3 times, like I've said so much in these videos, and he failed each time disastrously so, apologizing for plagiarism, getting caught, right, saying things about it, right? I'll put at the end of this, I'll put the "I've been stupid," quote that he did. That was from his plagiarizing years, right? I've been dumb. Like, he had to apologize. The guy was always an idiot and just, just a hack, a political hack. And so it isn't like he was so great, like they're trying to say what a great man is with the legislation he's did and the accomplishments, but that's not the case with this guy. And so even if he was great, dementia is unforgiving, right? Dementia hits you, just like with a great athlete when there's, when old age hits you and the game has passed you by, you have to hang it up, right? In every kind of sphere, it's like that. There's a time where it's time to move on. I've talked about that with Madam Expiration Date, Madonna. There's a time where, you realize you're 50 or 60 or 70. It's time that you move on to something else or you retire or whatever it is. And so Biden, it was years ago. Like, he shouldn't have run in 2019. His time was when Hillary won. Like, that was his big chance when Obama was done and he was Obama's vice president. They chose Hillary over him. And 4 years later, they came back to him. And what they're saying to the American public, to the Democratic public, the Democrats, is this is the best guy we can offer you. This guy. A guy who sucked and now is senile, right? Now, the Republicans are stuck with Trump because of the enthusiasm. It's coming from the people. Again, they're wrong, but they're coming from the Trumpers. The people are making Trump, forcing the Republicans to accept a guy they don't want. The Republicans have never wanted Trump, and they want him less now. But they have to hold their nose and go along with it because Trump has got so much enthusiasm and energy behind him, and he's dominating the Republican Party in a way that we have not seen with any other candidate. The Trumpers are stupid, but it's democracy at work, right? Like, it's democracy, this is democracy, where the people are saying, this is the guy we want. And the Republicans are, in Fox News there was like, no, you don't. Well, yeah, that's what we do. But the Democrats are saying, this is the only guy you can beat the guy that the Republicans really want. Even though he's senile, even though he's a hack. And just the arrogance of the thing, right? Just the arrogance of that, to say to you, guess what, Democrats? The best you can have is a senile candidate. You guys, this guy has been a senile president for the last 3 years, and then we want to give you another 4 years. And you can't do anything about it because otherwise you get this other guy that you despise. Like, that's the offer. That's the best that they can do. The best guy that they can put out there is a senile president who's going to be a more senile president in his second term, and then he's going to be a lame duck, and then he's going to have to hand it over to Kamala at some point. I mean, that's inevitable because he won't be able to do anything, right? And how long can they hide him away for, his presidency when World War III is raging and just all these things are happening? Like, things are going to go sideways quickly, and they're deteriorating in a worldwide situation with Israel and Ukraine and the economy and, all these things. And there's so many things that are happening all at once. And they're going to say, hey, you guys, the best you can get is a senile president. Like, this is what their deal they're offering to their people. Like, they're disrespecting every single Democrat. And the Democrats are lapping it up, right? I mean, I don't know how they'll react, but they should be furious at this. People who hate Trump should be like, my God, this is what you guys are doing? Like, this is insane. Anyhow, so that's Biden. Let me get over to Kamala Harris now. Here's the meme I have of Biden saying he's dumb after he got caught plagiarizing. This is a young Biden when he had lots of potential to be the sucky politician and eventually the dementia-ridden president.
I've done some dumb things, and I'll do dumb things again. So, ladies and gentlemen, I've been dumb.
See, I went to the big guys for the money. I was ready to prostitute myself in the manner in which I talk about it. But what happened was they said, come back when you're 40, son. And so I had to go out.
Okay, let's dive into Kamala and some other of these boneheads here. But first, the Supreme Court has ruled that Trump sort of has immunity. Let's start here.
He wrote, quote, distinguishing the president's official actions from his unofficial ones can be difficult. When the president acts pursuant to constitutional and statutory authority, he takes official action to perform the functions of his office. Determining whether an action is covered by immunity thus begins with assessing the president's authority to take that action. So, Andrew, of the 4 counts facing Donald Trump from Jack Smith, we could talk about the other cases in a moment, which do you think are likely to survive?
Well, it remains to be seen. I mean, I think the issue here is what evidence will survive, rather than it.
Okay, so they're talking about that here. This guy then talks about here.
Some of them tried to avoid testifying to the January 6th commission, which brings me to you, Marcus, as someone who worked on that commission. So what concerns do you have about the prosecution? And I saw you nodding that it's the evidence, not the counts.
Right.
So, will that call to Georgia to find
right.
more votes? Is that official or unofficial? And what Andrew just said about the Justice Department, especially from a candidate who's talking about retribution, does that mean that he can pressure the Justice Department to proceed with indictments and investigations against everyone he's talked about?
Against the January 6th committee. I think that, I didn't want to start there, but I think that's
against
top.
Joe.
Okay, so, it's a bad day bad week for the Democrats, or bad ever since the debate. It's gone, south quickly. Now, this could be scripted in a way where it looks like Trump is finally winning some of these things and, all the stuff that he's been undergoing. And then it looks like he's having a great week. He looks like a shoo-in to win the presidency. And then Joe Biden has a miracle comeback in his second debate with Trump right before the election. And they call him the comeback kid and, all these things, right? Who knows how this is going to play out, how much it's scripted or not. It's yet to be determined. But right now, things are going his way, right? So this is Kamala Harris right after the debate.
Some within your own party are wondering if President Biden should even step aside. What do you say to that?
Listen, first of all, what we saw tonight is the president making a very clear contrast with Donald Trump on all of the issues that matter to the American people. Yes, there was a slow start, but it was a strong finish. And
Okay, so we know that the 2 biggest shills for Joe Biden are Mika and Morning Joe Scarborough. Gumby Joe and Mika. Joe Scarborough started off his thing by saying he loves the Bidens. And they torched him for his performance, even Mika today. They're not denying that his performance sucked. And they talked about his closing statement. He babbled through his closing statement. And Mika said, that should be a slam dunk, because you could say that he was a little bit rattled by questions and having to think on his feet. But the closing statement is something they rehearse. And it's something where you memorize it, and he couldn't do that. And so for her to say he had a strong finish is just lying, like you're gaslighting. We all saw what we saw, right? And, she's loving life right now, because she's always had one chance of being president, and that is, what's happening right now. Joe Biden gets elected, and then he can't make it a full term, and then because she's not going to win an election, which we'll come back to, right? Okay, so I'm editing, and sometimes when I'm editing, I see things I didn't see originally. But this is what she first says.
Listen, first of all, what we saw tonight is...
What we saw? What we saw tonight. No, you're not speaking for anybody else. Nobody saw that shit. No, it's good. About stuff that she's, we already heard her say after that. What we saw tonight is not what anybody else saw. Even Morning Joe didn't agree with her. Even those shills, right? And so her saying what we saw like she's speaking for all of us. And if you were in the room with her and her husband, Dougie Fresh, all these, whoever was in there, her aides, she wasn't saying that. Everybody in the Democratic Party and the media was like, oh my God, what's happening? This is a nightmare. Like what they were talking about in there, they're all cynical. Like they have their official voice and their official persona, and then they're how they are behind closed doors. If you saw them behind closed doors, they would be unelectable. Just not only their actions, but what they say and how they present themselves. And so that she's lying about that. She saw what we saw. But this happens a lot in politics. It's just not the Democrats, where you have to come out and you have to go on TV and lie about what you saw in contrast to what Americans saw. Pelosi and all these other people, they came out and said, well, he did great. And I don't see any problem. And I haven't talked to one person. They just come out and lie. And that's what sucks about being a politician, because you can't give your honest opinion. You can't give your honest reaction. You're just going out there and telling the American people they didn't see what they just saw, which is, again, she isn't going to be held accountable for this when Joe Biden withdraws and if they make her the nominee. Like she's not going to be like, oh, she said this thing and now she is disqualified. But she's been lying for a long time about this. And there's a compilation that, if it isn't, there's a music in it. So if I can show it to you, I'll show it to you, about them all saying he's sharp as a tack. And that's coming up. My wife sent it to me. And it's all these pundits saying he's sharp as a tack when, back in February they said, hey, this guy has dementia. The American people said it, 70%, many of them Democrats, that he's unfit, he's too old. They say he's too old. And so they're saying, no, he's not too old. And they're forcing him on you, saying, we're not giving you another choice. And if you hate Trump, then you have to vote for Biden. And that's what she's doing. And the rest of these people, she's hoping that he gets elected. And then, of course, he's not going to finish his term. And then she becomes president. And her backdoor way of getting in there. She's a backdoor, Kamala knee-pads Harris. But they shamelessly lie. That's why I could never do this job, because you can't tell the truth, what your truth is, right? Which is, a horrible thing when you're in a position where you can't tell the truth. When you're in a relationship with somebody and you have to lie because you can't tell that person the truth. You can't be who you are because, the your truth will be offensive to that person or whatever it is. People find themselves in, relationships with their bosses, with their spouses, with their family members, all kinds of different people. You can't tell your truth, right? You can't be who you are. And, they're all about being who you are, right? In terms of all these suppressed groups, people in the LGBTQ, all these people, they're saying, oh, you should be able to be who you are, right? But she's not being who she is. She's not representing what she really felt about the debate. She's like, oh my God, he's going to screw me, and I'm not going to be president now because I can't get elected on my own. And, so, I mean, there was a real reaction from Kamala, but we get this crap, right, which we always get from politicians. And she's particularly heinous at doing it.
What became very clear through the course of the night is that Joe Biden is fighting on behalf of the American people, on substance, on policy, on performance.
Okay, so performance,
Joe Biden is...
He's like, what? You can't...
Extraordinarily strong. And
but I'm sorry,
that
on substance and policy and performance tonight, I mean, the president's performance tonight clearly was disappointing for his supporters. CNN is reporting Democratic lawmakers watching the debate were worried about the president's performance. One said it was a disaster. Another called it a train wreck. Those are Democrats especially worried that Biden did not punch back on Trump's lies.
We're going to come back to punching back in a moment.
Listen, people can debate on style points, but ultimately this...
Not style. He had a dementia attack, right? He was lost. I mean, come on, like style. What there's a style called dementia? Is there a style called Alzheimer's? Like, what are you talking about?
Election and who is the president of the United States has to be about substance. And the contrast is clear. Look at what happened during the course of the debate. Donald Trump lied over and over and over again, as
this is their talking points.
he is wont to do.
He's wont to do. He's want to do. He wants to do that. He has what to do. Do.
What happened during the course of the debate. Donald Trump lied over and over and over again, as he is
Want to do.
He would not disavow what happened on January 6th.
He wants to
He
do.
would not give a clear answer on whether he would stand by the election results this November. He went back and forth about where he stands on one of the most critical issues of freedom in America, which is the right of a woman to make decisions about their own body. He
Wants to do. What does he want to do?
has been completely ambiguous and all over the place about where he stands on that issue, despite the fact that he hand-selected 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention that they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade, and that's exactly what they did. And just 3 years ago, we commemorated the 2-year anniversary of Dobbs, wherein women across our country have been denied emergency health care,
All
have
that may be
suffered
true.
miscarriages
All that
to
may
the
be
point
true. But the president of the
these
United
facts are
States
very
was not
important.
able to make that case
Like even Anderson Cooper's like, bitch, please.
to Donald Trump on the stage tonight. I mean, you debated against then Vice President Vice President Biden 4 years ago, and he was a very different person on the stage 4 years ago when you debated him. That's certainly true, is it not?
Anderson, the point has to be,
Okay. Let's go back to those debates because what he said, he's worse now, but he was bad then. So this is Cory Booker set in on Joe Biden's stance on marijuana. Remember? I showed you the whole clip or most of the clip in my 2 videos ago, the first video on the debate. And Joe Biden says this.
You know, I'm part of that Obama coalition.
He's got this smug look on his face like, look at this guy. He's laughing at him, right?
I come out of the black community in terms of my support. If you notice, I have more people supporting me in the black community that have announced for me because they know me. They know who I am. 3 former chairs of the Black Caucus. The only African-American woman that ever been elected to the
So he's going to have another senior moment here. Watch him.
United States Senate. A whole range of people.
no,
My point is...
that's not true. The other one is here.
Look how confused he looks. He just realized that Kamala Harris is the second African-American senator, woman, and now he's got to lie.
I said the first. I said the first.
I said the first. No, you didn't. We just heard you say you're the only. You said the only, and...
African-American elected. The first African-American. So my point is...
So why is she laughing at him? Why is she laughing at him? Why is she laughing at him? Like, she's laughing at him. That's not laughing with you. It's laughing at you because you can't remember there's 2 of them and one of them's on the stage. Like you said, the only, meaning there was only 1 and there's 2. And Kamala's laughing at you, right? Kamala and Cory Booker are laughing at you, and they can't believe that that they're getting more support in the black community than you are. Like, they can't believe it. I mean, none of these people can believe that you're the front runner because you're senile, right? Because you showed over and over again in 2020 and 19 that you were senile. And they knew it. She's laughing. Like, she's not going, oh my God, what a brilliant man. She's not talking about how great a guy he is like she is now. She was laughing in your fucking face, bro. Right?
So my point is that one of the reasons I was picked to be vice president.
She's still laughing, right? So they're laughing at you.
President was because of my relationship, long-standing relationship with the black.
Okay, so that happened. So this happened, right, as well. So Biden was asked about domestic violence against women.
Vice President Biden, the Me Too movement has forced a cultural reckoning around the issue of sexual violence and harassment against women in America. Are there specific actions that you would take early?
So then he said this here.
No man has a right to raise a hand to a woman in anger other than in self-defense, and that's rarely ever occurs. And so we have to just change the culture, period, and keep punching at it and punching at it and punching at it. It will be a big... No, I really mean it.
The audience is like, oh my God, you just say that and do that with your fist?
It's a gigantic issue. And we have to.
So look at Kamala. She's biting her lips here, trying not to laugh because she knows he's senile as F, right? She was laughing at him at least twice. There's the times they were all laughing at him. He had multiple senior moments in 2020. So they all knew, she knew. They couldn't believe they were losing to a senile guy who's a hack and had lost 4 times before. He didn't even register as a nominee the other 3 times he ran for president.
Make it clear from the top, from the president on down.
And she's laughing at him.
That we will not tolerate it.
So that's look at him too. He was, he's worse now, but he wasn't great then.
Debated against then Vice President Vice President Biden 4 years ago, and he was a
You laughed at him, remember?
very different person on the stage 4 years ago when you debated him. You must, I mean, that's certainly true, is it not?
Anderson, the point has to be performance in terms of what a president
Exactly. Spoken like a person with a nickname, knee pads, is all about performance.
does. A
Right,
president
but
who
that is
incites
what's
an
scary for
insurrection
people
against the
watching this.
Capitol. No, but I got the point that you're making about a 1.5 hour debate tonight. I'm talking about 3.5 years of performance in work that has been historic.
But he's such a great man. I didn't laugh at him. I didn't laugh at Tim Anderson. I never laughed at him. I never laughed at him. What are you talking? I didn't laugh at him. I didn't laugh at him. I'm not laughing. I'm not laughing at him. He's a great man, Anderson. He's a great man.
The man who we saw on the stage tonight, is that the person you see in meetings every day?
The person that you saw on the debate stage that has, for the last 3.5 years, up until today, performed in a way that has
Up
been...
until today, when he had full senior moment. He just went senile right in front of us. I never saw anything like it. The guy, I mean, he was like, banging hookers and running laps and climbing Mount Everest. I mean, the guy was like, he was like 20 years old. I mean, he was barely like even, he was barely even showing any signs of age. We never saw anything that looked like he was going senile. And then today, he just had dementia. And maybe it's just one day. Maybe it was just like he caught a dementia cold. Maybe Trump was having dementia and he transferred it on Joe because I've never seen it before.
And about whether it be in the Oval Office, negotiating bipartisan deals.
Okay, so that's Kamala here. And somehow the 2 most annoying people maybe in the world, Chrissy Teigen and Kamala Harris, come together here.
First vice president of the United States to visit an abortion clinic, traveling earlier this year to a Planned Parenthood in Minnesota. We'll say no president has, no vice president before Kamala. So
I didn't realize I'd be the first, but what else is new?
This is why nobody likes her. What else is new? She is the first woman and person of color to be vice president. And so she makes it sound like that was her accomplishment. And aside from whether it happened in the election, it had zero to do with her. Like she brought no votes to the situation. I'll cover that. Let's get through this here. So she did nothing to be in the position she is other than get on her knees, which we'll talk about also, right? She's not likable. She's not electable.
But the reason that I went is because healthcare clinics have had to close, especially in the states with abortion bans, which I call Trump abortion bans, by the way, because no matter how much he wants to say, oh, leave it to the states.
Girl. Say
had
it.
he not had...
Say it, girl. Say it, Gil. You say that, Gil. So I watched the Democratic primary. I think I watched maybe all the debates, some of them, whatever. It was really entertaining, and I covered it here, you guys who were here for that. You will remember. And when they were heading into, before the debates, right before Chris Matthews got Me Too'd, he said, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris is the dream ticket. Now, at the time, no one knew who Kamala Harris was, but she was starting to get some run. Joe Biden had 20% throughout the primary, 20% of the Democratic vote. So that's about, 10%, 11% of the popular vote in the election, the general election. But in the primary, he had, it was just Democrats. So he had 20% of the Democratic vote just from name recognition alone. And it was a sea of bad candidates, including Andrew Yang, and wanted to give everybody $1,000, and Marianne Williamson, who thinks she's the daughter of Jesus or whatever it is, right? And then the other really bad Democratic candidates, Elizabeth Warren, all these people, Pete Buttigieg, and all of them. And the guy who stood out, other than Biden, was Bernie Sanders, because he had all that support from his previous run against Hillary, and he was polling pretty close to what Biden was. But the difference was, when it came to the primaries, when people had to choose somebody, they chose Buttigieg, who didn't have any money and any support, so because he had to withdraw and make a deal with Biden 3 primaries into it, right, because he was out of money, and Bernie Sanders. So Bernie Sanders would have been the choice. When people had to choose somebody, it wasn't Joe Biden. But before that even happened, they were really pushing Kamala Harris. And she got some run and some love, and they're talking about her being, a great candidate. And then people started to take a real look at her. Like, she was polling at 12%, which was the highest. She was starting to attack Joe Biden, too, because he was the front runner. So she thought she could challenge him. And then she was, Tulsi Gabbard really set in on her, embarrassed her, and said some things. And her record came out. But really, it was just, when people saw her, they didn't like her. And so the next poll, she was polling under 1% and never got 1% of the Democratic vote. That meant 99% of the Democrats wanted no part of her. And she did not make it to the primaries. She had to withdraw before even the first primary in New Hampshire and the caucus in Iowa. She didn't even make it to that. Months before that, she quit and threw her support behind Biden because she had no real choice. And she should have disappeared altogether. But then Biden said that he would pick a woman, which is really, you can't do that that's, to say that you're going to pick a person based on their gender. And then they were saying, well, what about all your, support from the African-American community? He said, well, I'll pick a woman of color. So he boxed himself into picking a woman of color. And there was like 5 prominent women, and like Stacey Abrams had a lot of negatives against her. There was no good choice for him. And so he picked Kamala Harris, who isn't really African American. She's part Jamaican and part India. The name Kamala is an Indian name. And she grew up with her Indian mother, and her, aunties, the Indian, and she was they were both professors, right? She grew up in academia, so she should be smarter than she is. But she grew up in an Indian household. Her dad and mom got divorced, and she grew up on college campuses in elite areas in California. And whatever she says, she claims she went to a historically black college, but she's not really, African American. She's Jamaican, whatever you want to say about that. And so she really wasn't what Biden was looking for, but she also represented some, the Indians were going to vote for her, Indians from India. And so, there was that. Like, she was also Asian. So she was Asian and, black and a woman. So he picked her for those reasons, and she had been in the election, but nobody liked her. She was unelectable. And the only reason she got into prominent offices was she dated this guy, Mayor Willie Brown of San Francisco. And he was separated from his wife, so I don't know if he left his wife to be with Kamala or what happened there. There's an article here, USA Today, one headline. Former San Francisco Mayor Willie Brown writes about dating Kamala Harris, appointing her to posts. And he gave her 3 jobs. And she gave him multiple jobs. Kamala D-Pads Harris. And so it was his relationship with her that gave her all these prominent positions and would later move her into the food chain and, the Democratic power elite in the state of California. But it wasn't because she was likable, which we saw. She's not likable at all. Her cackle, all these things. And so Biden was forced to pick he boxed himself into position of picking somebody based in demographics alone. And he picked Kamala, right? And Kamala was also, he knew, I don't know if his people knew this. I'm sure they did. She's so unlikable, it was protection against him that people would not want Kamala over him. Even the Republicans would rather have Biden than Kamala, right? And so, she's that unlikable. And any calls of replacement of him, means that you get Kamala. And Kamala ain't going to beat Trump, right? So this is the situation. You have somebody who's completely unelectable, and she could be historically not only the first woman of color to be vice president, but also be the first woman of color to be president, all because of Joe Biden's goofy appointment of her, and not because the American people would ever vote for her, right? And so this is like great. Like this is a really cool storyline here. That you have someone who's this unlikable and this goofy. She's not senile, and the Democratic Party are kind of stuck with her. And if they go around her with a white guy, right? If they go with Gavin Newsom, who's probably the best possible option for them. If they go around her, they're going around a person of color who was coming from the same state, and Gavin Newsom said he'd support her. But if they go around her for a white guy, right, and say, we're going to bypass Kamala, then that narrative plays horribly. And she's not going to be vice president again. So they're basically, snubbing her. Gretchen Whitmore is a Witchmore or whatever, is she's a nightmare, in various ways herself, and she's a woman, white woman. And so you're going around somebody who the narrative will be is you're bypassing the person who's next in line and going with somebody who's white or man or both, right? And so it's a nightmare for the Democrats. Like that's part of the reason they're boxed in with Biden, and part of the reasons why he picked her, because they're boxed in. It's just wonderful. It's like a great story. And if Kamala Harris runs, it's its own train wreck, right? And so maybe they think if they wait till the very end and substitute Kamala in for Trump, that she might have a chance before people realize how much they dislike her, maybe hit Trump with something else. I mean, the whole thing, like it'll be interesting to see how they play this, but there's no good option for them because there's not really a suitable candidate that's going to be better than Biden for their, and he's senile. So, like, anyways, speaking of annoying, let's go to this thing we have Sharon J. Stone. She had some kind of brain seizure kind of thing, and she's been crazy ever since. Vote blue. Then Christy Brinkley. Ladies, Jerry Lewis. Ladies, let's stick together. Keep your eyes on the issues, not distractions. Dementia. Too much is at stake. Vote. The distraction's dementia. This is how our daughters and sisters win. Thank you, Sharon J. Stone. Sorry, darling. The real America isn't rich. We can't afford property. We can barely afford to pay our bills nowadays. Plus, feud, you live in a fantasy world. Drink your gold juice and stay out of politics. Trump 2024 USA. Are you out of your mind? He's not even in control of himself, let alone this country. So she got hammered on social media because this is what she said.
I've been thinking a lot about last night's debate. And I've been thinking about the fact that more women are registered to vote than any other singular group. So ladies, remember this. No matter how sleepy Joe may have seemed, he's wide awake for you. So vote for yourself.
Okay, vote for yourself. Ladies! Trump calls Joe Biden Sleepy Joe. So she just, in her, brain damaged way, acknowledged that insult, right? So speaking of delusional, here's James Clyburn. Him and Nancy Pelosi, a few other politicians, went on a denial tour. And I saw a little bit of him. He's the guy who saved Biden in South Carolina when he was on the ropes, when they rigged the primary for Biden against Bernie Sanders. And so this is what he says.
Congressman Clyburn, since you are there in Wisconsin and doing lots of events.
Wisconsin.
Tell me the truth. What are you hearing from people on the ground?
Almost total, and I'm saying almost because I have not heard a single person express anything negative. All they're saying to us is keep Joe Biden moving forward.
Exactly. Not one person he talked to said, hey, that guy looks like senile as F out there. Okay, big news. I just ate lunch. And I watched the news. I turned on CNN, MSNBC, and some sports stuff. But CNN, this was great. the discussions now by these pundits who now have to say what we've been saying, at least things I've been saying for years, and they're having to deal with realities that they were in denial about, right? And so if you look at what it says there, this was the first thing that came out. There's 4 or 5 major bad points, all bad for Biden, but this is the worst. It says that the Biden supporters that are voting for Biden or voting for the Democratic ticket, 63% of those people are voting against Trump, which is what I've been saying forever. Trump is the center of their universe. And when people say, that Biden didn't get all those votes, well, he didn't get all those votes. But, maybe it's cheating or maybe people hate Trump that much. We don't know. But people really hate Trump. And so 63% of them are voting against Trump. Only 37% are voting for Biden. But, those people will all probably convert to voting for somebody else, right? And so this is devastating news because it means no matter who they put in there, out of the people who are voting for Biden, at least 63% are just going to vote against Donald Trump. For the people who are going to vote for the Democratic nominee, Democratic candidate for president, an overwhelming majority are just going to vote against Trump no matter what, right? So that's horrible news for Biden because, they're not voting for him, which we knew all along.
Because of the sweeping immunity that it affords this president and future presidents.
I mean, and Democrats have employed this strategy to some effect, recently. We can look at the midterms most recently to see how they try to frame these elections in existential terms. You might not necessarily want to vote for this person, but this is not an election about an individual. This is an election about these life-altering issues. You'll hear them say, listen, you all didn't vote for Hillary in 2016, and look at what happened to the Supreme Court. So I would imagine we're going to continue to hear that type of messaging. Vote on the issue, even if you aren't a fan of Joe Biden. But the problem is that isn't really an affirmative case or an inspirational message. And sometimes that's kind of off-putting and draining for voters. They get tired of hearing that.
Since 2015-16, we've had this messaging about Trump being in the center of it all and almost no media coverage of Biden or anybody else. Like 85% or 90% of the media on CNN and MSNBC is about Trump. And their whole messaging, their whole platform, I've said this over and over again. I must have said this 1,000 times. Like you just turn on the news and it's all about Trump, and they don't really have a platform if Trump is not there. That's why I said they're not going to put him in jail, because their whole worldview revolves around Trump. And it's best when Trump is when Trump is president. CNN, MSNBC, and the Democratic Party, the CNN, MSNBC got record ratings, and the Democratic Party was being listened to more than ever when Trump was president, because people were freaked out about Trump being president. That's what sucks about the Trump presidency. It activates the liberal base and all these things, right? And so they've done this, but, people are worn out by it. And now that Joe Biden is senile, it's like, how is this guy better, right? And so, they have to reboot, but they really can't. It's kind of it's great. Like, it's just great.
I think that's exactly right. I mean, the campaign and Democrats have always felt as long as you could make this race about Donald Trump and not a referendum on Joe Biden, then he might have a chance. But I think the problem is the debate made it more about Joe Biden than Donald Trump.
This is the first thing I said when this debate happened. They're getting to it in a much shorter time than usual, where they say what we say just years later. But I've been saying this for years anyway, but this debate was the first time it was about Biden. No matter what Trump did, it didn't matter. Biden crapped himself on stage. He had a senile debate. Like, it's an epic debate, something I'll remember that debate forever. Like, we'll go back to it. Just as something hilarious, go back and watch what happened here, because it was, the chickens coming home to roost, right? It was them putting out a senile candidate in 2019, and then the inevitable time bomb that was there when it became obvious that they couldn't hide it anymore. And these guys have all tried to hide Joe Biden by talking about Trump, and making it about Trump. But now you can't do that because it's about Biden. Like Biden's there, and that's not going away. And the alternative, which we've already heard, is a disaster. They already would have moved on from Biden if they could. They would have done it in January. But who do they give it to, right? If they had an actual primary, Kennedy probably would have won or came in close second, and that would have been a divisive, right? I mean, Kennedy being out there as a Democratic nominee talking about anti-vax and environmental issues and things would have been a disaster for them. Kennedy would have been, the front runner going into that, and depending on who else was there, and the debates would have been brutal, and all these things, right? And the other clown candidates like Marianne Williamson and all these people, to start off that kind of primaries, and it would have been a mess. Like we don't know how we would have had the money, and it would have been a mess. Kamala's a disaster, and so they could have got rid of him, but the primary was undesirable, and they couldn't control the outcome of that thing. I mean, they could do it, but Kennedy could run as a third-party candidate like he's doing. I mean, the whole thing was a disaster, and so they don't have much option here in terms of who they pick, and whoever they pick is not going to be great. But at least for them, it's not Joe Biden, and the person isn't senile. But it's a mess because it's no longer about Trump; it's about Biden. And once you make it about Biden, he's not very compelling. He sucks, even if he isn't senile.
The Supreme Court immunity case, of course, strengthens his argument that Trump will have unchecked power and that U.S. democracy is at stake. But I think to the point that about a third of the electorate is movable, I do think it's important to note that Biden was having a number of problems with the electorate before the debate on issues unrelated to his age. I think polls consistently show his age is the top concern among Democrats, independents, sort of across the board. But he was having issues among key voter groups on a range of other issues, whether it's the Israel-Gaza war, whether it's the economy, people very upset about inflation, and even their argument on abortion, I think, only takes them so far because in some of the states they need to win, abortion is protected, and so it might not be the motivator that they hope it is.
See, this is all relevant. Like, this is what's great about this right now because CNN sucks. Like, most of the thing they say, I can't wait to turn it off. Like, I'm just watching it for whether I'm going to make it into a video or not. And I always could make it into a video about CNN sucking. But what they're saying is actually relevant and has truth in it because the problem for Biden now as opposed to 2020, obviously his age is the big thing, but he's a known entity. Like, when you go into a presidency, you go into your first term, you're running as a first-timer, they don't know who you are. And you're going to say, I'm so different, I'm going to do things differently. Whether you're Republican or Democrat, you can run when people want change, especially when things are bad and they're looking for someone to tell them they can change it for the better. But then that guy gets elected, and inevitably, he doesn't change it for the better. And so the inspirational message is lost. Because then it's become, well, let's finish what we started. And people are like, well, what you started sucks. You didn't deliver. You made promises you didn't deliver on. And that happens for every candidate. Their first term is a definer, and they become a known entity. And the enthusiasm that this guy might be different is gone. And that has left for Joe Biden. Because he's got a lot of negatives in his, what's happened, and some of it's under his control, some of it isn't. Like the border, there was a bill put out by a Republican Oklahoma candidate that was, to deal with the border, and Trump and his supporters killed it so Biden wouldn't have a solution and would hammer him in the election, right? So there's all these politics going on, and some of it's out of Biden's control and his people. I mean, it's always going to be like that. But either way, he's not like some guy that they love. He's not loved by the people, like the prospective voters and independents of these people, swing voters, and he doesn't have the enthusiasm. And it's 4 years removed from Trump, so the Trump hatred isn't as fresh for people. And so, even if they wanted to cheat, they'd have a hard time doing it because it's not going to be even close, right?
I want to look at something that our friends over at Axios had out this morning, and it's called Behind the Curtain, the Imperial Presidency in Waiting. He stretched the powers of the presidency in ways not seen in our lifetime. He says this consistently and clearly, so it's not conjecture. Thanks to Monday's Supreme Court ruling, Trump could pursue his plans without fear of punishment or restraint. And then I just want to show something that the former president posted before the Supreme Court decision. This was on Sunday, about Liz Cheney. This is something that he reposted. This is the type of thing that demonstrates yet again you are not a stable adult and are not fit for office. That was Cheney's response, because the underlying post is saying that Liz Cheney is guilty of treason.
And that he wants a televised trial of her, and would clearly, want to see her jailed for treason in some way. This is the piece of retribution. You and Jake asked about this at the debate, and pressed him on this promise of political retribution. His answer was, "Oh, my retribution is just going to be success in this election." But he continues to put things like that out on social media, which clearly raised the question, well, no, is success of the election just your retribution? Or are you going to use the levers of government to go after your political opponents, which he has said he is going to do and feels justified in doing? And the Supreme Court ruling, some may interpret to say, loosened the guardrails a little bit around that for him to do just that.
Yeah, I mean, he's...
See, for Trumpers who just, it's the idea that this is your president, and Biden's not my president, right? The stuff that people said at the beginning. And the idea that somehow Trump being your president is psychologically better for you. Trump is more entertaining and more likable. Of course, Biden's gotten really entertaining more recently with his senility. I can't say Trump's more entertaining. In the beginning of his presidency, the liberal reaction to Trump was very entertaining. Towards the end, Trump was a disaster. He just played himself. Like, he went from my favorite character, president in the show, this thing I call the show, right? Everything we see, this performance that goes on in front of us, politics, sports, entertainment, all these things, right? With the news media. And Trump was a great character there. I like Trump in The Apprentice, but he was always a selfish, narcissistic a-hole. And, and he doesn't care about you at all. Like, he has disdain for people. And you could see it in The Apprentice, and you can see it, where he thinks he's better than people, and he's like a person that thinks other people are there just to serve him. And, they all think this in different ways, but he's, he had it going in as just an arrogance, and he's almost like thinks of himself as royalty, right? And, lots of people think that way, but Trump is, he's acted on it in different ways. And so his next, if he wins, this is it for him. He's not going to run again. He'll be too old, and, he's already had 2 terms, and whatever that all plays out. I don't think people would want him run again. So he's not going to care about what you think anymore. He used the truth community. He went on Alex Jones and Breitbart, they told him to, Steve Bannon told him to flirt with the truth community. So he used the truth community to bolster his votes, right? And then he didn't do anything for the truth community other than endorse the Cubies, which was a disaster for the truth community. Anything that he did was all negative, right? He still flirts with the Cubies now and says things about the deep state and these other things. But he already has the Cubies, so he doesn't have to pander to them very much. But again, he uses people, like he did with the January 6th people that, went up and, he got them to go up there and protest, and, when it backfired on him, he turned on him. He turns on anybody. He turns on everybody, eventually, all of his closest friends. Look at who's, that guy Cohen worked for him forever as a fixer. He turned on him. He turned on Steve Bannon. He turned on John Bolton. Like, look at all these people, these generals, people who once, he said these were great people, and then he turns on them. He's had 3 divorces, cheated on his wives. He's a selfish prick, and he sucks. And he doesn't need you anymore after he gets elected. Whatever he does as president, of course, he won't get very much done because there'll be so much opposition to him. It'll just be a nightmare. Like, him winning, it'll probably be the worst possible thing, and it looks like that's going to happen. And, I'm whatever. I'm like whatever about anything. I don't care. And, I'm willing to see how things play out. And, the one thing that Trump surprised me in the first term was he was against war, and he didn't drone kids. He doesn't like to kill people. Like, he had the power to do that, but there's no wars, and he got rid of ISIS and all these things, by not using them as an asset. And so Trump was, better than these presidents about that. But I don't know what he's going to do with Israel. He's probably just going to give them like a just a green light to do everything they want, and that's could be disastrous. So you don't know how it's going to play out, but I know that Trump sucks, and the retribution and the revenge will be kind of funny maybe in the beginning, kind of entertaining, but eventually you're going to have to move on, and the only way to move on is bring people together, and Trump is incapable of doing that. I don't know who can, because America's so divided, and probably the division's going to stay this way until there's some sort of, it's like we're in the middle of a civil war right now. But this Supreme Court ruling is not only bad for Trump or possibly even for Biden in terms of, for us, for them as presidents, but any president in the future can do whatever the F they want unless they get impeached, which is hard to do. Then they can just do whatever they want and there's nothing to stop them, right? So this is kind of a bad ruling because it speaks more to the whole, the idea of what the president can and cannot do. And you can get a bad one and they can just do the worst things. They all do criminal activity and don't get called on it anyway, but this is, another level of support for that, right?
Yeah, there's plenty of reporting about plans for to herd undocumented immigrants into camps, to send red state National Guards to blue cities and states. All these other sort of enormous plans. And you're right. He puts that stuff on social media. He tells his supporters. At the debate he kind of watered it down, but he tells his supporters that there will be retribution. He talks about the court cases against him as being entirely justifying his future use of the Justice Department to persecute his political critics.
There's no way to know what Trump's going to do. He's going to be selfish. He's going to be myopic. He gets triggered. He's very revengeful. He showed on The Apprentice. There's two things that stand out about what he believes. As a businessman and a reality TV show person. One, that he liked the apprentices to have these, sort of yelling criticism, slamming each other, sort of rap battles almost in his boardroom. He loved the drama. And whoever outshouted the other person, this is why his debate style is what it is. He thinks if you outshout the other person, and you dress them down and you insult them, you win, right? He has no idea how winning a debate, how the American people see him. And, I'm sure he's been advised on this. But he likes that kind of thing. He likes going after people on social media. He doesn't let anything slide. He's in these sort of rap battles and these feuds and things. And he's been doing that for, ever. And the other thing is he likes revenge. And you can see that, right? He's very petty and he listens to everything and he, doesn't like any sort of criticism or, look at what's happened with all these people that have gone against him who used to be in his inner circle, who he praised these people and they are Trump supporters. Chris Christie, and then he throws them under the bus and he just uses people and throws them away. And if any of them say anything bad about him, he goes out against them, right? And you can see this in The Apprentice, how he was about this type of thing. He just, he's the Donald and you can't question him and just all these things. And so you don't know what he's going to do, but revenge is totally his thing, right? He is a vengeful person. I don't know how I'm going to see it when it happens, but I'm tired of them going after Trump. And I don't, just this, it's a bad divorce. And watching somebody else's divorce might be entertaining for a few minutes, but they just drone on about each other. All these things, right? And America's getting divorced, and I'm just tired of the, because I don't care about either side, and I'm tired of listening to the bitching and all these things. And so, it's, for me, just as what I do here, I'd like to see this thing move on. And the only way for it to move on, is for Trump to go. There'll still be division between the left and the right, but at least it'll stop. I just don't want to hear about Trump anymore. Trump, I have an aversion to Trump.
It cuts both ways. Adam Kinzinger was on the show yesterday saying, well, now Joe Biden pretty much has the ability to send SEAL Team 6 after Donald Trump if he wants to. He was being somewhat facetious, but somewhat not.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. So this isn't a good ruling because it helps Trump right now. And I said this before, when all these stupid cubies said we need to render people and throw them in Guantanamo Bay and have secret military tribunals and throw away their constitutional judicial rights, the rights to due process. I'm like, what are you, stupid? If they, let's say, all right, Trump's the president and he can do that, what happens to the next guy? They were saying this when Trump was president, but what if Biden started doing that? Right? And, Obama was one of the worst people on whistleblowers. And so, it's like just stupidity, right? You open this kind of thing up and then you don't know what kind of president you're going to get. And an anti-truther person that starts just, there's all kinds of things that can happen, right? Where the president is like then like a king and no longer, like this idea that when the sovereign is sworn in, when the king or queen are sworn in, they carry an orb and a scepter that represents that the king or the queen is the God's representative on earth. Like that's crazy, right? That person can do no wrong, manifest destiny, because whatever you do is backed by God because you're God's representative. And that's what they're saying now about Trump or the president. And that means any president can be like that.
A brand new CNN poll is revealing a harsh reality for the Biden campaign. 75% of registered voters think Democrats would be better off if someone other than Joe Biden was at the top of the presidential ticket.
This was all consecutive, right? Like I wanted to turn it off and I'm like, well, this is where I just kept on watching. I'm like, well, this is all interesting because this is real shit. Again, could be staged. They might have, this is their way of trying to deal with a problem that they know is going to happen with his senility. Who knows what it is, right? Kamala not being electable. I mean, we'll see how this plays out. And again, this is a big time. It's the 4th of July coming up. There are things going on. Like there's extended family issues there's things going on in my life where things are intense. Not really to do with me, but people around me and things like this are having, extended family things, illnesses and whatnot. It seems like there's a lot of things going on. Like things are just up and, it's intense time. And 4th of July is like a part of that. But this is just keep on getting worse for Biden because 75% of people say want to step down. Like it's almost like they can't they have to get rid of him. Like they can't keep him. I mean, no matter what their situation is with the other people, like the American people have spoken and, ignoring the American people in this case will probably be disastrous. And the media, I mean, it's just almost like he has to go.
This is also really key. The general election horse race has essentially stayed the same despite that debate last Thursday. Joining me now is Democratic Congressman Jake Auchincloss of Massachusetts. Thank you so much for being here. Let's start with that new poll. Most voters think Democrats can't win with Joe Biden at the top of the ticket. Does that worry you?
Yes. This election has always been a very close run thing, probably 200,000 votes in 5 swing states. And we got to take every single voter seriously. Joe Biden has the delegates. He is the presumptive nominee. It's up to him whether and how to go forward. As he's going forward, though, he needs to make this a team sport. We need to see his cabinet and strong Democratic surrogates out there making the case to the American public, not just about the accomplishments of the last 4 years, but also about the vision for the future.
So it seems like the networks are pushing for Joe Biden to be, the media is pushing for this. Like they've known for a while he's senile and they don't want to be held accountable for all these things. And American people know and, everybody knows. So, what are you going to do about it, right? So they're bringing in people that are pushing for Joe Biden to step down. And so that's, that's a new thing that they're doing. They would ignore him and tell everyone how great he was, ignore his flaws, his liabilities. They've done that now for the past 5 years. And, at some point, it's got to suck for them because they can see what's happening, right? Like it's to be in the room with these people, to have a camera in there and watch them, these supporters of Biden, watch them as they saw the debate. You see the real reaction and you'd realize that they know it's worse than we do, right? Like they've been around them and now they're realizing that, their credibility is at stake, right? Okay, so I got to go back to editing here and, it's Tuesday, July 2nd, around 2 o'clock. And yesterday I was covering this. Now, Don Lemons, let's watch this. It's hilarious. So let's check in with Don J. Lemons, a guy who just gets it. Is Trump mentally fit? Dr. Bandy Lee on the Don Lemon Show. Exactly. After that debate, we have to ask, is Trump mentally fit? Because everyone thinks that Biden's senile.
And a book on the psychology of the former president himself, President Donald Trump. Dr. Lee, thank you so much for coming on. The name of your book is The Psychology of Trump Contagion. The subtitle, I think, really explains what it is. The subtitle is what?
An existential threat to American democracy and all humankind.
You nailed it.
Did you witness that?
This is wonderful.
Last night on the debate stage with Donald Trump.
Yes, absolutely. I would rather have not had such an exaggerated title, but it's unfortunately the truth. And yes, I became all the more concerned last night.
So you had no concerns about Joe Biden as a doctor. Dr. Bandy Lee.
Let's talk about, folks are talking about, the Donald Trump's lies that he wasn't fact-checked and so on. And that's probably a bigger threat to our democracy than, Joe Biden's performance. But the
senility, his dementia.
The thing I think that is trending today, that is catching fire, is the chaos among Democrats and even maybe at the White House and the administration, and that's Joe Biden's performance. So can you tell me your impressions, and then we'll talk about the former President Donald Trump, your impression of President Trump and President Biden and Trump's cognitive health after last night's debate?
Well, first of all, I think I should explain that the reason why my eminent colleagues and I have come forth in exceptional ways in 2017 at the start of his presidency was because we believed that he posed an existential threat to the nation. And
yeah, that was your tagline in your book.
To the globe, because of the powers of the presidency that he would have. Someone with his...
No, he was president and the world did not end. In fact, it was doing better, and again, other than the COVID disaster, than with Biden. We weren't this close to World War III with Trump. And I'm not saying Trump was better, because Trump was a disaster in various ways. But in terms of the optics, the world wasn't coming to an end during Trump's presidency.
Psychological dangerousness and apparent mental...
Psychological dangerousness? Is that a psychological term? Because it sounds kind of like what a quack would say.
Unfitness at the time, which subsequently we came to prove when we had sufficient information. So we came from a standpoint of mental health experts who had a societal responsibility. In addition,
okay, the question was about Biden's performance. Can you comment on that? Dr. Bandy Lee?
To the individual patients we see, we also have a societal responsibility. And we warned that he would be a public health threat from the very beginning. So that was when we came out at my conference at Yale School of Medicine.
Oh my God, Yale.
Then published our book together, The Dangerous Case of Donald Trump. 37 psychiatrists and mental health experts assess the president. It became an unprecedented New York Times bestseller.
I've done psychological assessments, and I'm much better than these clowns. I mean, like just this person here, look at how clueless she is, right? Like this is not a person with critical thinking skills. Because a good psychologist, there's lots of shills and hacks, and I don't know if shill's the right word, but like if you get a divorce, you can go hire somebody to do a psychological assessment on you and your ex-spouse and your kids, and they're going to give you a favorable report because you're paying them. And then, most times, I saw this happen. Like I saw this happen in my ex's divorce, right? And then the other person can hire their own psychologist, and they talk about this. Like when I was in my assessment class, there was, my professor, he did this in the court system. And he would, he talked about how he was in courts and the opposing psychologist and him were like battling it out. And so it's not a real science in that way because, and the fact that people can be manipulated by money and who's paying them, right? You're not paying them to come out and say you're crazy, right? And so that's how it works. I'm not saying every psychologist will do that, but it happens quite often. And so Trump's going to have his people. They're going to say Joe Biden is senile, and Joe Biden is going to have his people. And so when you do that, you cease to have any real credibility. What I do here, and people don't like it, I am not partisan, right? I never was a Republican, and the Democrats are worse now. So, back when I voted Democrat. I came from a liberal family, a left-leaning family, and, that's what and it was different back then too, right? But I saw, I wasn't all that, even when I was younger, I was more balanced about these things, right? But it's been clear that the Democrats have lost their mind. But that doesn't mean the Republicans have gotten great all of a sudden. They've always sucked. And so if you understand politics the way it is, and, anything that you cover, you have to look at what's going on, right? And assess what's going on and be honest about it. And she's not doing that. So she loses any credibility as a person and as a professional.
Seller of its kind. And our goal was to try to warn the public that this man was far more dangerous than he presented himself to.
He presents exactly the way he is. It's not hard to read Donald Trump. The narcissism, I knew the kind of person he was back when he did The Apprentice. In fact, he was a little bit better than I thought as president. When he was, he wanted to have a North Korean style military parade for his inauguration, and he was talking about using nuclear weapons. But to his credit, he avoided war. He got rid of ISIS by telling the CIA not to order ISIS to do anything or whatever happened there, because they were a CIA asset. And so Trump actually showed a little bit more restraint, and he seemed to have a little bit of a distaste for killing innocent people, where Biden didn't, because Biden droned 7 kids. Did you talk about that? When he made up ISIS-K and he droned 7 kids? Did you write a book about that? And Obama droning kids, right?
Did you witness that? I hate to cut you off, but just in the context of last night in this conversation, did it, because I want to keep on track. I only have so much time with you, and I appreciate the history of your book. I really do. But I need to know from your experience.
My God, if Don Lemon has got to keep you on point, if you're rambling about stuff that has nothing to do with anything that he's talking about. He brought you on to talk about the debate instead of bringing anybody on that would say Joe Biden has dementia. He's bringing you on to say Trump has dementia, but he has to ask you about Biden, and you're not even staying on task. You're just babbling about your book that no one is going to read.
Of studying both men, and especially Donald Trump, what is your impression of Biden and Trump's cognitive health after watching the debate last night?
Yes. Watching the debate didn't truly change my assessment that Donald Trump poses an extreme danger. He shows
he goes, yeah, she's a total quack. She sucks. She's horrible at her job. She's the worst. She's probably even worse than you, Don Lemons. She's the Don Lemons of the psychiatrists, the psychological field.
Of the greatest degree. And he has proven himself to be unfit. We were able to convene a panel to do a fitness evaluation when we had the appropriate information.
Okay, he wants to talk to you about last night. Not you're going back to your whole book thing here. He already warned you.
And so
you can't even stay on task. Do you have dementia? What's wrong with you? You're staring here blankly, like some kind of a robot, incapable of looking at Don Lemons and seeing what a piece of crap he is, and how incompetent he is as a human being, as a presenter. And then Joe Biden, who has dementia. Yeah, we all know Donald Trump's an asshole. We know he's narcissistic. We know he's selfish. We know he's going on a revenge tour. I mean, anybody with half a brain can figure out what Donald Trump's all about, right? And, but what happened with Joe Biden when he showed full-on dementia?
Based on this panel of top mental health experts.
They were top mental health experts. They're top. Who ranked them? Who ranks them as top? Because they went to Yale? I mean, you're a Yale person and you're horrible.
independent experts, he was found to have.
What makes them experts? They got a little certificate that says they're an expert, right? Like they're good at it.
Basically failed all criteria for mental fitness. Now, we haven't had the same kind of alarming signs, or actually no alarming signs, from Joe Biden.
Like the fact that he couldn't complete a sentence didn't. The fact that he couldn't complete a sentence didn't. She's a social psychiatrist. Psychiatrists are the worst because they're just pill poppers. You know, we've had psychiatrists come in and they just write scripts, right? There's certain people, doctors of psychology, and there's psychiatric nurses, and then there's psychiatrists that can prescribe mental health pills for kids in treatment centers and outpatient clinics, right? So I work with these psychiatrists in the treatment centers I was at, and then also I work with them in the outpatient clinics. And there's lots of people who just want their kids on Ritalin meds or whatever it is, and any kind of meds. And they would try to use these pills that had horrendous side effects. They would turn the kids into zombies, and the kids couldn't even function. We all knew it. Like you'd see the kid get his pills, right? You give these kids a pill, and all of a sudden they turn into they're drooling and walking around banging into stuff. And, they took this stuff called trazodone or something like that, Traza something or other, to sleep at night. And the kids would take it, and they'd be walking down the hall and just lay down in the hall and fall asleep in the middle of the hall, and they wouldn't make it to their room, right? Like that's how quickly it worked. It was like tranquilizer, elephant tranquilizer. And so psychiatrists are horrible. They come from the Freudian. I mean, it's just a bad. Freud was the original psychiatrist, doctor of psychiatry, and it's just they're all weird. Like not all of them. Like the ones I've met are all weird, right? And she's just fits the mold. And so she's saying there's no signs for Joe Biden.
Based on watching him last night, of course, we can see he comes across as very old and frail,
and senile, and with dementia.
And he's certainly aged a great deal from the presidency, just like
he has been showing signs of dementia since 2019. The signs: getting angry, Alzheimer's, like stuff like that, getting angry without provocation, being confused. Just his motor functioning, all these things, right? And he's lost in, all the ways he behaves. He's in the way he articulates things and his train of thought. All these things are signs of dementia. I mean, anybody can see it, right? Like, you're horrible at your job.
Every other president who actually does the job of the president. And so I can see how his impression would be very dramatic to people.
He can't be president if that's the way he acts. Those things are important. Being able to articulate clearly your thoughts, people having confidence in you, and your inability to recognize dementia makes you're horrible at your job, right? Like, you suck at it. Of course you're on Don Lemon's show. Like, Don Lemon is the only clown in the universe who would bring on a person who's going to say Donald Trump is unfit mentally after what we saw from Joe Biden. Like, you just have to eat what happened, right? Even if you don't want to jump on the Joe Biden sucks or Joe Biden has dementia bandwagon, you don't bring some kind of gaslighting person on who has an agenda and is clearly unfit for this kind of work, right? Okay, so today's Tuesday, July 2nd. This is Bernstein, Woodward and Bernstein are both out talking crap about Biden. Biden had 15 horror show-like moments and shocked by debate. Disaster poll in New Hampshire. Dems horrified, demands answers. All these things, right? So they have multiple articles here. This is like what's happening with the media. Like, the media is demanding this guy step down. And they should have done this in the first place. They're now saying, well, it's just dementia now. I just did a pre-intro about that. But no, he's had dementia he was elected with dementia. Biden grapples with political fallout following presidential debate. Live updates. Stop Joe. Biden had over a dozen. Had the same thing with Carl Bernstein here. And so, the confused look. This is a look that he's had now for a number of years. And there's moments. And when you start having moments, it's like, well, this isn't reversible. You can delay it, right? Once dementia sets in, once these moments happen, well, then it's time to, like, all right, we gotta hang them up, right? It's over. Like, there's certain things that, whatever it is in your life that you end up saying, all right, I got to change what I'm doing because you've learned that you've got this thing going on. This is Biden. We'll get into this video here later. Okay, so let's get into the more videos here.
All right, let's now take a look at what the public opinion polling is telling us since Thursday's debate. NBC News' Steve Kornacki's at the big board. So, Steve, we don't have...
It's at the big board.
A lot of data yet, but we do have some new numbers from the CBS YouGov poll over the weekend. This is just an immediate snapshot following the debate, but what does it tell us?
Yeah, I mean, everybody's waiting for sort of the definitive poll to come out. We don't have that yet, but we've had a couple now. There's another one this morning that looks very similar to what I'm going to show you from this CBS YouGov poll. And they asked a couple questions here. Let's show you this first of all. They asked a general question. Should Biden, this is just in general, should he be running for president? They've asked that throughout the year. Back in February, 37% of voters said that Biden just should be running for president. Now, right after the debate, they have that number dropping.
All right, well, we've seen these polls already. With other people, but think about only 37% of people thought he should be running in February. Again, they were pushing on him on the American people then, and they knew he was going to be like this, right? They knew, like they're saying the staff was shocked. No, they're not shocked. They've seen him break down. There's going to be stories coming out at some point of people who are around him and stuff that he did, right? Like grandpa's putting his shoes in the refrigerator again, like this kind of stuff. Like it's just like things that are there that he's doing. Because what we've seen is just, what they're allowing you to see. They've hid this guy away for 4 years. If he didn't have dementia, they wouldn't have used COVID to cover up for him that he didn't have to go out and campaign. He didn't have it in 2020 to campaign. And they used COVID to cover it up. It's ridiculous to think, let's just see whatever he says here.
To just 28%. By comparison, they asked the same question about Donald Trump post-debate. The number is 46%. Now, more specifically, in response to...
But that's not because of Donald Trump's... These are because of his legal issues and because he's Trump, right?
To the debate, they asked this: what should Biden do right now in the wake of this debate? And in this CBS poll, 64%, basically 2/3 of the electorate, said he should step aside. And I think
the Republicans would be smart to say not to. Like if they were smart and they're not, they would say he should still run.
What's particularly troubling for Biden in that number, not just the fact that it's 2/3, is look at within his own party. This isn't just his political opponents saying he should get out of the race. This is worry within his own party, concern within his own party. 45% of Democrats saying that Biden should step aside. And obviously that performance, I think, just reinforcing and maybe even increasing in terms of its potency, the main concern, or one of the main concerns we've seen over and over when it comes to Biden, and that is his age. This is a Gallup poll just before the debate, and already going into the debate, 67% of voters said they considered Biden too old to be president. That's 30 points higher than the number for Donald Trump. And just take a look at the other.
Well, that's just Democrats here. And so, the numbers are horrible, and meaning that you guys aren't listening to the polls. The Democrats have been trying to force this guy on you. And it means they don't have a confidence in a second choice.
Oldest nominees in history: John McCain in 2008, Dole 96, Reagan in both of his campaigns. The number was somewhere in the 30s, even the 20s for Reagan. That Biden number is a number we've never seen for any candidate before. And I will say, as we wait for definitive polling, we do have one poll that is now asked the horse race question after the debate, asking Biden versus Trump after the debate, who are you for? It's just from one state. It's from New Hampshire. But in that New Hampshire poll, this is out just a couple minutes ago, Trump leads by 2 points in the new New Hampshire poll. If you can read my writing, Trump +2. And the critical thing there is in 2020, Biden carried New Hampshire by 7.5 points. So we don't have a pre-debate poll from St. Anselm was the pollster here. Their last one had been in December.
Okay, so that's a 9-point swing. So these are disastrous numbers. I mean, they're big into the numbers. And, they're getting to the area where they couldn't really even cheat their way into this one, like if whatever happened before.
Remember, they had Biden up 10 then. This is
But, so, like, they have to get rid of this guy, and they don't have a valid option. They might not. Like, so that's great.
Most powerful office in the world. It's an office that not only tests your...
So, the thing about Trump's immunity, this is Biden's first press conference, and now he's got to go out and, he's got to do damage control, and he's going to have his moments now, right? They're going to have days that he's going to suck again, and they're going to have these moments, and those moments are going to be highlighted. It doesn't matter how good he is in some days or some speeches. They're never going to be flawless because he's always going to look like a deer in headlights. But now they have this immunity thing. So I turned on the news yesterday waiting for more information about, and I'm sure this morning, they're talking about the Supreme Court and immunity and what they can do about the Supreme Court and all these things. Because they've allowed Trump to get away with what they consider criminal behavior. But of course, both things are true. Like, Trump sucks and they're also targeting him and whatever. But now it looks like Trump can win the presidency. They're going to sentence him in that other whatever court that is, and whatever is going to happen with that. There's already his one felony thing to do with hush money, which people aren't, like, the hush money thing is stupid, right? Again, Trump banged a porn star and he paid her hush money. That's true. He did it. He's guilty. But it's not, come on. Like, it's not something they would usually do to a former president. It's a mild, these kind of things are compared to the stuff that they're doing, looting billions of dollars. I mean, the presidents have done horrible things. War criminals. Joe Biden droned 7 kids, right? Like, there's no talk of that. Like, they talk about how Trump's so horrible, but Trump didn't, at least as far as I know, drone 7 kids in Afghanistan, and it was like 10 people. He killed 10 innocent people only to cover up or to distract people from the debacle of the Afghanistan withdrawal. But anyways, they now can talk about this. So they're trying to pivot and make it about the Supreme Court and Trump, but the dementia thing isn't going away.
Your judgment, perhaps even more importantly, it's an office that tests your character. Because you not only face moments when you need the courage to exercise the full power of the presidency, you also face moments where you need the wisdom to respect the limits of the power of the office of the presidency. This nation was founded on the principle that there are no kings.
Slurring his speech, that's not something they're not talking about. When people slur their speech, the guy has had a stuttering problem since being a kid, and that's coming back up too because, whatever he's done to cope with that, he's coming back around. But he slurs his speech. You can't really hear it. He wears dentures, Okay, one last little bit here. Joe Biden is, he really kills himself with this take, right? This is not a self-serving take.
The public has a right to know the answer about what happened on January 6th before they are asked to vote again this year. Now, because of today's decision, that is highly, highly unlikely. It's a terrible disservice to the people of this nation. So now the American people have to do what the courts should have been willing to do, but will not. The American people have to render a judgment about Donald Trump's behavior.
Well, they're not going to do that. So people don't believe the same things you believe. Like, this is, I would say, the majority of people. Like, the people who hate Trump, sure. Not that, the January 6th was a disaster by Trump. It was a horrible decision. He got worked and played so much. From the time that COVID came out, Trump got worked on COVID. He got worked on the election. And he just did everything that was the same, the going in the opposite direction of what his best self-interest and the best interest of the country was. It was a horrible decision to do all that stuff. I've talked about that. Trump is completely should be held accountable for being set up, for allowing himself to walk into a trap, right? Like, it just was. And again, maybe it's part of the script or whatever. Like, this. I mean, was he just stupid, or was he, just acting, or script, was just following the lead of his handlers or whatever it is, right? But what Biden's saying here is that it's unlikely Trump's going to jail before the election. So this is big news. Like, he's acknowledging that Trump is probably going to make it through the election without serving any sort of prison time. And what happens if he's convicted or he's sentenced and he needs to go to jail or prison after he's been elected president, when he can pardon himself from prison. Like, you know, I mean, it's that kind of stuff, right? This kind of apocalyptic, you know, what the hell's going on kind of stuff here. But now he's claiming that the voters have to be able to stop Donald Trump. And the voters think he's mentally incompetent. And so, like, he's put himself in a horrible position here that there's no other way to stop Trump. And so it's got to be the voters. And maybe he thinks, well, I'm the only guy who can beat him. But, you know, that's not even, right now, that's not happening. And so, I mean, this is bad for the Democrats and Biden, at least in terms of, you know, what's happening right now, whether it's scripted or not. That's for us to see in how this plays out.
The American people must decide whether Donald Trump's assault on our democracy on January 6th makes him unfit for public office in the highest office in the land. The American people must decide if Trump's embrace of violence to preserve his power is acceptable.
Well, you didn't want the American people to decide, right? That's why you're prosecuting him, because, you know, that's why this whole thing's happening. You want to be able to take it out of the decision of the voters. You don't trust in what he calls the MAGA Republicans. And so if the American people decide by 60% that Trump is a better president, you know, better candidate than you, are you going to accept that as being, you know, like this is, you're already, you know, he hasn't been convicted. Like whatever, you know, you're already saying he's guilty, as is all the other people here, the media pundits, and he hasn't been convicted, right? Like you know, I mean, it's just the whole thing's fallen apart in ways that, again, I always have to question how much of this is scripted or not. But if it isn't, it's, you know, either way, it's great to watch, right? He's fallen apart mentally. The Democratic Party's fallen apart, their narratives and things. Now, Trump being elected is not a good thing. I don't know who's, you know, in terms of the effects of it. Like, I'm not talking about the person or the party or any of these things. I'm talking about what happens because a person's gets elected. What are the results? Because Trump isn't going to pass shit. He's not going to, his policies, whatever he says he's going to do, it's unlikely he'll get any of it done. And it's not, and what he's proposing isn't necessarily good either, right? Just undoing everything that Biden did, you know, and whatever else he wants to do, his revenge tour. But then there's the effects, like when Trump was president before, the liberals got so much, right? This movement, it's not the real liberals, it's the, you know, this movement, you know, all this stuff, the gender stuff, the social things. I mean, so many things happened when Trump was president, the riots and the, you know, all these things. And so what happens if Trump's presidency, you know, is, I mean, it's not going to calm things down. It's going to exacerbate things and probably expedite the collapse of America. I would think, you know, both of them. I mean, whatever's going to happen, America is going to collapse. But I think Trump will be, you know, it'll just be a bad time. More censorship on the internet, just all of it. Like all the things that go with it. Like, what's the effects of a Trump presidency? You know, just because you're like happy, oh, it's not Biden. Yeah, it's just like a popularity contest, right? It's like some kind of, you know, it's not real. It's not, you know, Trump isn't going to save the country and doesn't want to. Trump is a selfish person. He doesn't care about the country or you or anybody else. And so it's nothing like that, right? It's what happens afterwards. But right now, it looks like Trump is going to win. And again, things change because they, you know, they control these narratives.
Perhaps most importantly, the American people must decide they want to entrust the president once again, the presidency, to Donald Trump, now knowing he'll be even more emboldened to do whatever he pleases whenever he wants to do it.
Okay, so my wife sent me this last night. Sharp as a tack.
This version of Biden, intellectually, analytically, is the best Biden ever.
He is sharp, intensely probing, and detail-oriented and focused.
For example, we have 1,000 trillionaires in America. I mean, billionaires in America.
Zero.
This is a man who is sharp, who is on top of his game, who knows what's going on.
He's smart. He's on his game.
His mental acuity is great.
This is a very sharp president.
He's a pretty sharp guy.
People that I've talked to say he's as sharp as a tack. He's fine.
They say he's sharp.
There's not a problem. He was sharp. He was
sharper than anyone I've spoken to.
The president is sharp and he is tireless.
He is sharp as ever.
And he's fine. All this right-wing propaganda that his mental acuity has declined is wrong.
His brain is good. He's still great.
He is sharp in meetings.
I believe the people who say that behind closed doors, Joe Biden remains sharp.
In meetings,
So this is, this is their talking point. Like their talking point right now is Trump lied in the debate, right? The talking point is essentially around Trump lying. And let's not focus on Biden's mental breakdown and his showing dementia. Let's talk about Trump being a liar. They always have these talking points. I've showed you the big lie was a talking point, right? They'll say the same thing over and over again. It's not just Democrats. Republicans have done this for years. I mean, Karl Rove, some of these things they're taking right out of a Karl Rove playbook that's, all the way back to that, whatever that guy is, Alinsky or whatever his name is. There's these manipulative psychological operations and how you wear people down by just repeating the lies and the things over and over again. But in the early part of this year, they realized they had a problem with him having dementia. The problem with the dementia problem, when people are saying he's too old, there's no turning back from that, right? I talk about this with, the Heartfulness debacle, my, spiritual organization, Saj Mark turning into a cult, right? The Heartfulness cult. And there's no saying, oh, that used to be a cult. You don't redeem yourself when you're a cult, right? Like there's no, oh, they used to be a cult kind of thing. That just doesn't exist. Same thing with dementia. It's not like, oh, he used to have dementia. Once you're labeled too old, that label's going to stick and it's going to be cemented because they're going to see more and more. They'll be looking for it, right? And so this is what's happened with the debate. People are now looking for him to be too old. And so this talking point is, silly because it's not.
Joe Biden is sharp.
He's sharp. He's fit. There is nothing to these challenges, these suggestions that somehow he's not sharp. He's sharp as a tack.
Making sure that we're able to make every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to do with the with the COVID. With dealing with everything we have to do with. Look, if we finally beat Medicare.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump?
Well, he's right. He did beat Medicare. He beat it to death.
Actually, Joe Biden is sharper and has more mental acuity than Donald Trump because more people believe that actually Joe Biden's mental acuity is better than Donald Trump.
I mean, he's sharp. He's funny. He's sharp as a tack.
Kamala Harris says he is up to this task. He's, sharp as a tack. And he's
So, somebody did a great job with this, right? But this is their talking points, and it's not going away. Like, you can't undo people's perception that he's got dementia. You just can't do it. Like, it can't be done, right? Because he's going to have gaffes. He's going to have senior moments, and that's going to go on now from the rest of the election, and if he becomes president, it's just going to be there. And then, at some point they have to deal with it, no matter what they're thinking they can do. I mean, it's insulting to the Democratic voters and democracy in general and all of America to keep on saying the guy is okay. We can see that he's not, right? And it's been for a while. They should have never ran him in the first place. And it's one of those problems, like I said, you can't cure it. Like you can't say, all right, he recovered from it. Like the difference between him and Fetterman is Fetterman had a stroke and then he's going to get back some of his faculties as time goes on. He hasn't really. Fetterman hasn't. But, he's still young enough where they can say, oh, he's going to recover, and he's, recovered, he's better than he was, but he still sucks, and he wasn't great ahead of time, just like Biden, right? None of these people are. And none of them are worth this. Like, it's not like he's so special that, like, even, we can ignore the dementia, right? Like, he's always sucks, right? So, they all suck. None of these guys they're all so replaceable because there's nothing about them that makes them stand out as being somebody you have to have as your leader. None of these people are great leaders. None of them. They might have charisma. They might have a passionate base, right? Trump has his supporters that think he's the only one and they're delusional about what he is. But there's not one of these guys that dementia is like, well, he's so great that we'll put up with the dementia, right? And it's just going to get worse, like I said over and over again. So this came up on my YouTube feed. Now, Stephen A. Smith is kind of a douche and, sports guy. And I don't think he comments on politics very much, but he has some kind of podcast because, everybody does now. But he has said before that he thinks Biden's too old. Like he's one of the people that are, it's just so obvious. It's what people aren't saying, right? People know, and everyone's jumping on the bandwagon. But he had this to say.
Upon millions of people that are concerned about what we witnessed Thursday night in that debate, when Biden mumbled and Trump said, I don't understand what he said. I don't think he understands what he said. This is a soundbite you're going to hold on to.
So he goes on to say that Biden should withdraw. It's just, I don't know. Like, I want to talk a little bit about being right, But I guess I'll save that for the next video or whatever. Because it's important, not just me, but people in the truth community, right? That they always end up where we are in some way. Maybe not the way that is the way we would like, but them admitting without any kind of, oh yeah, sorry about that, you were right all along kind of thing. It's always like, well, you guys are crazy, but you were right about this. But they don't even say that. And then it's, whatever. So I'll get into that maybe another video. But the thing about this was, from the very beginning, I said this when Biden first ran. The difference between the Democrats and the Republicans in terms of the kind of demographics that they cater to is that Biden was supposed to bring in people of color the way that Hillary Clinton didn't. And they thought, well, Biden is connected to Obama and Biden has the support from the African American community. And that happened during the election. But that's fading, right? And so that was one of the reasons to pick Biden. But they could have just picked Cory Booker or Kamala, but didn't. So, whatever. That's, But the other thing is they need the youth vote. The Democrats really need the youth vote. The college, you're more liberal in college. A lot of liberalism in college, right, in these years. And so I was like, how are they going to get the youth vote with a guy who says malarkey? And they try to, package this guy to the youth. But as he's gone more and more senile, plus his stance on the Israeli war, his failure, he's lost the youth vote. He's lost, a good portion of the African-American vote and the youth vote. And that's what helped carry him during the election. And he hasn't replaced that with any sort of demographic. And so, this is an absolute mess for the Democrats. And, it makes me happy, but, I think the Trump presidency, a second term, is a disaster, worse than the first. And all the things that were bad for all of us in the truth community, bad for Republicans, bad for, the country, will be even more present in a second term with Trump. And we'll see how this plays out. Again, this could be just part of a show now, and they I don't know how they're going to do this, right? But right now, it's like they have to get rid of Biden. And if they don't, that's really interesting, right? Because everyone knows they have to. It's not, you can't run a senile guy, you can't run a guy with dementia, but they're going to do it. Like they might do it, right? And so I kind of almost want to see that. I don't know. I kind of want to see the infighting with the Democrats at the convention. A lot of this stuff has become a lot more interesting since his breakdown in the debate. I was only mildly interested in this election. As you guys know, I was barely covering it. And I don't even watch the news anymore the way I used to. I usually watch sports instead of the news. Because I'm not into it. I just go over the whole thing. But Biden's performance brought me back in. It's great. Anyways, only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely born from the Apocalypse and the Ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.